Chapter 244. After hearing Lin Yao's words, a person appeared in the minds of the Long family members. The Long family was a prominent family in Hua Nation. Moreover, they were in the Elysium, so the Long family members were naturally familiar with the demigod ranking. Not long ago, there was a huge change in the demigod ranking. A person rose like a comet and arrived in Hua Nation with the bearing of a king. He ascended to the top of the demigod ranking and was known as the number 1 demigod in Hua Nation. He was ranked 3rd on the demigod ranking. This was the highest ranking demigod in Hua Nation to date. Rumor had it that this person was the master of the Wang family in Zhongnan. He was in his 20s and his surname was Zhang. Slowly, that mythical figure merged with Zhang Xiu in front of them. Long Yingqing felt as if her entire brain had exploded. Everyone's eyes were filled with extreme fear. It exploded. Lin Yao cried out in horror, "Mr. Zhang, hold on." Meanwhile, Li Zaiji was still looking down at Zhang Xiu as if he was giving orders. "You're ready?" "What do you mean? Ready for what?" "Kill you." It was too late. Everything was too late. When Lin Yao and the Long family members realized that this inconspicuous young man in front of them was the most popular person in Hua Nation, Zhang Luoxia, everything was already too late. Zhang Xiu's eyes were cold and sharp. He waved his right hand at Li Zaiji. He was wearing a suit with tight cuffs, but it felt as if he was carrying a tremendous force. Boom! With a thunderous explosion, a monstrous force was released from his sleeves. This invisible force was so great that it was as if a giant god had waved his hand. The air, grass, and rattan chairs in front of him were all crushed into powder. Even the corridor, stairs, street lamps, and wooden pillars in the distance were crushed into powder. This force was so powerful that it made large bulldozers look like child's play. It came quickly, fiercely, and with destructive power. Everything in front of this force disintegrated. Panic. Infinite panic. Ms. R.V., Long Yingqing, Xiao Xueqing, the whole Long family, all looked at this scene in horror. Li Zaiji's bodyguard, who fell into the room, rushed out angrily. Since he entered a famous sect, he had never been defeated. He vowed to tear Zhang Xiu into pieces, but he was stunned. Was this still the power of a human? He was actually so strong. What made them even more terrified was that this power was aimed at Li Zaiji. Even rocks had been crushed into powder, so how could Li Zaiji's body of flesh and blood withstand it? When the bodyguards in the banquet hall heard the sound of glass shattering, they immediately rushed over. Today, the black bodyguard had mistakenly believed the Long family's words and offended that super VIP. Now that there was a situation, it was a good opportunity for them to perform well. However, when they rushed over, they saw this scene. Their mouths opened so wide that they could swallow an egg. Oh my God, their legs went soft. The 1.9 tall big black bodyguard knelt on the ground and respectfully prostrated himself on the ground as if he was worshipping a god. This kind of power could only be achieved by a god. Long Yingqing, who was sitting closest to Li Zaiji, felt a force that seemed to have materialized whistling past. With a muffled bang in her ears, the high and mighty mistily exploded into a bloody mist. Ah! An extremely frightened scream rang out, and everything returned to silence. The silence was frightening. God! Lin Yao had seen a top demigod make a move, but they didn't have such a terrifying destructive power. Under such power, the body was so fragile that it couldn't withstand a single blow. It was like the law of destruction, destroying everything. Dead, dead. Mr. Li is dead. Seeing that Li Zaiji's seat was now empty, they felt a sharp pain in their eyes. They stared so hard that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The bloody mist that filled the air and the pungent smell of blood reminded them that what they saw just now was not an illusion. Silence, a deathly silence. Everyone's heart was shocked. At this moment, they were almost suffocating. Li Zaiji was killed, and in such a domineering way. Zhang Xiu said, "I'm already prepared, but it seems like your Li family isn't ready yet. I hope you won't disappoint me." Only then did the people present slowly come back to their senses. They couldn't help but step back. Long Yingqing's face didn't have a single trace of blood. She trembled as she said, You. Just who are you? Zhang Xiu said, Who do you think I am? Long Yingqing swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty as she looked at Zhang Xiu in fear. Zhang Xiu treated her very badly. It could be said that he always went against her. He was simply a great disaster, but it was incomparably real. Although meeting him wasn't a good thing and she was even splashed with that, a young girl's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. Unknowingly, Zhang Xiu had already walked into her heart, but now everything had become so strange. She opened her mouth with difficulty and said, You are Zhang Luoxia? This name seemed to have magic. When he said it out loud, everyone present held their breaths. He wasn't even 20 years old, but he was Wang Xintong's boss. His surname was Zhang, and he had such extraordinary power. His identity was already obvious, but guessing and him admitting it were two different things. Zhang Xiu said, That's right, I'm Zhang Luoxia. Boom! The person in front of them was really the #1 demigod in China. Lin Yao, a martial artist, immediately shuddered. He quickly walked out and knelt on one knee, respectfully saying, Junior Lin Yao greets Mr. Zhang. Greetings, Mr. Zhang. In front of the #1 demigod in China, all the martial artists felt a chill run down their spines. Facing such a peerless powerhouse, they had no way of fighting back. If they were Li Zaiji, the result would be the same. They wouldn't be able to withstand a single move from him. We greet Mr. Zhang. Unknowingly, Lin Yao had already knelt on the ground with his head lowered. He didn't dare to get up for a long time, and his body was trembling all over. The more a martial artist was, the more they understood how terrifying Zhang Xiu was, and the more they were in awe of him. Greetings, Mr. Zhang. Everyone in the Long family remembered how they had offended Zhang Xiu. They were so scared that they knelt on the ground and didn't dare to move. They were very upset, especially Long Xiaoru and Long Xiui, who had humiliated Zhang Xiu at the auction house. Thinking of this, they were sweating profusely. Xiao Xueqing and Bai Xian were completely dumbfounded. They felt as if they had traveled to another world. It was as if they were watching a myth. However, it also made them realize that there was a huge gap between these people and Zhang Xiu. It was not the gap between an ordinary person and a rich person, nor was it the gap between a rich person and a noble. It was the gap between a mortal and a god. They were mortals, and Zhang Xiu was a god high above. God ruled everything. Xiao Xueqing and Bai Xian looked at Zhang Xiu in a daze, especially Xiao Xueqing. She didn't know why, but she felt a little disappointed. Her friend was so powerful. Logically speaking, she should be happy. However, she felt that Zhang Xiu was high above and out of her reach. For a moment, she felt empty and had mixed feelings. Zhang Xiu said, Ms. RV, I'll say it again. If you want Bai Xin to be RV's spokesperson in Hua Nation, it's only possible if you break the contract. Ms. RV was also very shocked. She had seen the world, and after the extreme shock, she said, So, sir, you're the new demigod Zhang Luoxia. Mr. Zhang, your reputation is like thunder in my ears. However, I'm afraid that the matter of RV's spokesperson is not that simple. Ms. RV said, You killed the heir of the Li family of North Korea. The Li family won't let this matter rest. Also, the Long family of Hua Nation is the fiancé of this beautiful lady beside me. You'll face the revenge of the two families. Zhang Xiu glanced at Long Yingqing. There was no trace of sadness on her face. There was only shock when she looked at Zhang Xiu. It seemed that she didn't have any feelings for her so-called fiancé. However, it was understandable. Political marriages were based on interests. Everyone wanted to seek benefits for their own family. Who would be moved by true feelings? In such a game, whoever was moved by true feelings would definitely lose. Zhang Xiu even saw a trace of joy in Long Yingqing's eyes. It was a joy of relief. It felt as if her whole body was relaxed and free. Ms. RV stared at Zhang Xiu and shook her head gently. Honorable Mr. Zhang, you're too reckless. You may not know what you've done wrong. When you know, it'll be too late for regrets. Elysium wanted to accept Jiang Xiu, but there were many people who opposed it. Now that the Long family and the Li family had joined, the possibility of accepting Jiang Xiu was close to zero. Honorable Sir, are you really ready? Welcome the anger of the Li family and the Long family. Chapter 245. Anger. Jiang Xiu's gaze swept past Miss RV. There was no satisfaction in his eyes, only the raging flames of war. His aura gradually rose. The Li family of North Korea, the Long family, the Elysium. His gaze suddenly shot towards Long Yingqing and landed on her snow-white face. Suddenly, Jiang Xiu made his move. Boom, his eyes turned pitch black, and his hair grew crazily, like flames raging in the sky. Where is the anger of I, Jiang Luoxia, directed at? The #1 demigod of China had made his move. Suddenly, black clouds rolled in the sky, and the moon dimmed. Electric currents sizzled in the distance, and a violent wind blew. It was as if a god had descended to the mortal world, causing people to tremble. Oh my God! Only then did the people present truly feel how powerful Jiang Xiu was. He didn't just kill people with a single blow. His power shook heaven and earth, causing a shocking change in heaven and earth. The dark clouds continued to press down. Long Yingqing's delicate body trembled, and her pretty face was as pale as paper. She could no longer stand. Her legs went soft, and she collapsed to the ground. She felt incomparable pain. This pain came from the depths of her soul. In an instant, her forehead and face were covered in bean-sized beads of sweat. Then, her entire body began to curl up. Ah! In a castle in Galuya, an incomparably mournful and angry howl suddenly sounded. This howl didn't come through body waves, but directly appeared in the minds of the people in that world. What's wrong? In the Elysium meeting, a man shrouded in a black robe trembled in pain. With a bang, his body trembled. What's wrong? Speak. Everyone present was a demigod. Jiang Luoxia had come to Europe. No, to be precise, he had been tricked by the people of Elysium to come to Europe. They wanted to decide this matter, to kill or to submit. They were still in the midst of an intense debate when an accident suddenly occurred. Say something. The man under the black robe pressed his hand tightly on the solid wood table. His hand was transparent, but black gas kept escaping from this transparent hand. It looked very evil. Long Zizong, someone did something to your great-granddaughter. His voice was painful and hoarse. What's going on? Many people present knew what had happened. Back then, the little girl called Long Yingqing was about to die. Long Zai found a monk and used a secret technique to save her life. From then on, the little girl sacrificed herself to the monk. Therefore, the Long family owed the monk a favor. But someone had done something to the little girl's body. Why would the monk be in such pain? How could a great monk be stumped by such a small problem? The one who spoke was an old Chinese man. His face was full of wrinkles, like a work of art. At this moment, there was a relaxed smile on his face, and he didn't take it seriously at all. Not only him, but everyone present also disagreed. They boasted that they possessed strength far beyond this world. They believed that they stood at the peak of this world and that no one could shake them, let alone threaten them. Hurry up and settle it. We still have important matters to attend to. But the monk under the black robe was trembling violently. Black qi was constantly emitting from his body. His eyes were piercing red, and his face was thinning at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was obvious that his strength was disappearing very quickly. He roared in pain, "It's Jiang Luoxia." What? Once this was said, everyone present was shocked. What's going on? The black-robed monk said, "He wants to forcefully pull out the dead soul that I planted in Miss Long's body. That is a clone that I spent a lot of effort to refine. It is the source of my life. Jiang Luoxia. He wants to pull it out alive. The dead soul has no place to stay. It will collapse." Ah! The black-robed monk screamed in pain. This feeling was as if a person's soul was being forcefully pulled out of his body. One had to know that the soul and the body were fused together. The relationship was like skin and flesh. This was a forceful and bloody separation of skin and flesh. You can't win against him? Long Zizong was shocked. The demigods present also widened their eyes, waiting for an answer. They didn't believe it. The monk cultivated the Tao of soul sacrifice. His cultivation was all here. Even if Zhang Luoxia's combat strength was stronger than his, there was no reason for him to win against a monk in terms of cultivation. What kind of joke was this? It was imaginable that a city dweller who wasn't even 20 years old could win against an old monk who had studied Buddhist scriptures all his life? Ah! The black-robed monk screamed in pain. Right now, it wasn't just his face. It felt as if his entire body was withering. Save me! Hearing the black-robed monk's cry for help, the relaxed expressions on the demigods' faces disappeared. In an instant, they became serious. They realized that the situation wasn't right. The black-robed monk actually couldn't win against Jiang Xiu. Based on the current situation, if the black-robed monk didn't make any changes, he might die on the spot. Thinking of this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Zhang Luoxia actually had such high attainments in the mysterious and unfathomable soul sacrifice. It's great now. We were still discussing whether to accept him, but he gave us a show of strength first. One of the men slammed the table angrily. This person must be killed. The black-robed monk was still screaming in pain. The Tao that he cultivated was extremely unorthodox. Very few people would cultivate it. Therefore, although there were many demigods present, none of them could help. Save me, a voice sounded. Sacrifice the rook to save the king. The man in the 9-python robe slowly turned around and said, It's not easy for you to refine a clone, but compared to your own life, it's much more important. There's a saying in China, where there's life, there's hope. If the black-robed monk cut off his connection with his clone, Zhang Luoxia wouldn't have a medium to attack him. At the very least, he would be able to save his own life. It'll be too late if we delay any longer. The black-robed monk clenched his teeth and formed a strange hand seal. He chanted an incantation that was difficult to understand. His entire body trembled, and the thick black qi on the surface of his body dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Ah! He exhaled softly as if all his strength had been sucked out. He didn't even have the strength to move. He seemed to have aged a lot. His face was thin, and his skin was like the skin of an orange. How do you feel? The black-robed monk said, My life is saved, but I've lost 70 to 80% of my cultivation. But then, his expression became very strange. He said, Zhang Luoxia asked me to pass on a message. Those who offend Zhang Luoxia won't have a life for a life, but their entire family will be annihilated. Whoosh! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Zhang Luoxia is so arrogant. How dare he look down on Elysium in public? A cold voice sounded. A mere newly ascended demigod dares to spout nonsense here. I think Elysium has been too kind these years. They've already forgotten how powerful we are. What a joke. Just now, someone actually suggested taking in Zhang Luoxia. What else do you have to say now? The demigods were filled with righteous indignation. Elysium, they were the high and mighty Elysium. It was their greatest humiliation to be bullied and humiliated like this. If we don't kill Zhang Luoxia, how can Elysium have any face left? The man in the 9-python robe also frowned. He asked, What else did he say? The black-robed monk said, He also said that he would give everyone a greeting gift. He told me to tear open my chest. As he spoke, he felt a burning sensation on his chest. Moreover, it was so hot that he couldn't stand it. He suddenly tore open his clothes, and the light of a profound character shone out from his body. What is this? Before he had even finished speaking, the black-robed monk's face began to contort in extreme pain. The light of the character grew even brighter, and he screamed again. When it reached its peak, boom! The black-robed monk's entire body exploded. The entire hall was filled with charred corpse ashes that drifted in the air. A deathly silence. The demigods present were all dumbfounded. They all stared with wide eyes. Even the man in the 9 python robe's expression changed greatly. A trace of fear appeared in his eyes, and he tightly grasped the longevity stone talisman in his hand. What kind of technique was this? He had actually killed a demigod from hundreds of miles away. What kind of technique was this? How terrifying was this? Was Elysium going to fight with such a peerless powerhouse? Descending 9 mysteries to cleanse the heavens, 1,000 years of work. Even without a square inch, he was still outstanding. Chapter 246. Deterrence. What is deterrence? This is deterrence. Zhang Xiu had already been implanted into the body of the black-robed monk through the divine clone medium long before the black-robed monk abandoned the chariot to protect the general. In terms of magical spells, Zhang Xiu left them behind by 3,000 years. Dead. Zhang Luoxia added another murder case in Elysium. First, it was unknown, and now it was the black-robed monk. Zhang Luoxia. The eyes of the 9 pythons' robe narrowed, and he said coldly, "It's you who don't know what's good for you. Don't blame me for being ruthless. The proposal to accept Zhang Luoxia into Elysium is cancelled. Immediately issue the Elysium demigod hunting order." Long Zizong said, "This Zhang Luoxia, his means are so unpredictable. We have to take the long view and make sure to hit him in one blow. Otherwise, if we let him escape, we will be in big trouble." A man on the side said, "Long Zizong, I think you are scared out of your wits. Who are we, the dignified Elysium, afraid of?" The 9 pythons' robe said, "It's not a bad thing to be cautious. Zhang Luoxia's origin is mysterious, and the 3rd place on the demigod list is not a joke. Let's discuss it carefully." At this time, above the banquet sky, the dark clouds finally dispersed, and the moonlight scattered. Long Yingqing, who was curled up on the ground, felt that she was seriously ill. She was wet all over and was helped up by someone. What did you do to me?" Zhang Xiu said, "Nothing, I just killed the demigod who planted the remnant soul in your body." Miss Arvy's face changed greatly. "Gandalf is dead? Impossible." Zhang Xiu said, "Miss Arvy, you don't believe me?" Miss Arvy knew that Zhang Xiu was a demigod with extraordinary strength and unpredictable abilities, but how could he kill someone hundreds of miles away? Please forgive our old lady for only having such a shallow knowledge. She had a close relationship with the Long family and the Li family because of the black-robed monk. That monk was the one her great-grandfather had brought her to receive the ceremony. He was a wise man. Someone came from behind and whispered a few words in her ear. Ms. Arvy's face suddenly changed, and she stared at Zhang Xiu. No, respected demigod, you really killed Gandalf." Zhang Xiu said, "I have nowhere to vent my anger." Ms. Arvy's face was ashen. Everyone in the Long family was shocked. They looked at each other in dismay. This was simply like listening to a storyteller. Killing a demigod was simply unheard of. Ms. Rv squeezed out a smile and said, "Dear sir, I think so. Ms. Xiao Xueqing, the spokesperson for RV in China, is more suitable." Zhang Xiu glanced at him coldly. "You have no say in this matter from the beginning to the end." Ms. RV shut her mouth in embarrassment. Zhang Xiu said, "You seem to be very familiar with the people of Elysium?" Ms. RV said, "My father's Zheng family is from Elysium, but he died early. I only know the surface of Elysium. In comparison, the Li family and the Long family are both branches of Elysium. That Ms. Long has also been to the headquarters of Elysium." Zhang Xiu said, "You've been there?" Long Yingqing's face was pale. "Yes." Zhang Xiu said, "Then you must remember the way." Zhang Xiu thought that he would have to spend some effort to find the headquarters of Elysium. He didn't expect that it would be so easy. Long Yingqing nodded. "That's the Holy Land." Lead the way. The news of Zhang Luoxia's arrival in Europe swept through the Chinese martial arts world like a storm. The news of Zhang Luoxia killing Li Ziji of North Korea also blew up on North Korea's martial arts forum. Many people from North Korea cursed. Damn it, wait for the revenge of the Li family's demigod. On the other hand, the special department of Hua Nation in Europe was extremely nervous. That night, they received feedback from the country to pay close attention to Zhang Luoxia's movements and provide strong support. It seems that our worries are unnecessary. The man reading the newspaper said. Yes, sir. The woman said with a sour and relieved expression, Mr. Zhang killed the crown prince of the Li family and completely fell out with the Li family and the Long family. It's almost impossible for him to join Elysium. Then, the man reading the newspaper had a solemn expression. Then it can only be an enemy. His good mood just now was gone. It was Elysium, an existence that even superpowers like America and Hua Nation were afraid of. Not good, Dark Dragon. We received news that Mr. Zhang has set off to the west of Galuya. The man reading the newspaper and the blonde woman were stunned, and then their expressions changed drastically. Not good. The Holy Land. The man called Dark Dragon who was reading the newspaper said with a solemn expression, It seems that Mr. Zhang is going to the Holy Land. That's Elysium's base. Crazy, crazy. He's not going to kill his way into Elysium's base, is he? The fat European man's blue eyes widened, and his lips trembled. Dark Dragon said, looking at Zhang Luoxia's style of doing things, it's really possible. Oh my God, that's Elysium's base. Since the beginning of World War I, planes and cannons have to take a detour there. He's going there alone? The blonde woman hugged her head. Dark Dragon's expression was very serious. He said, I have to contact the country about this. For a demigod who favored Hua Nation, that was too precious. Yes, there were many demigods in Hua Nation. They either lived in seclusion or stayed out of harm's way. However, a demigod like Zhang Xiu was really one of a kind. To Hua Nation, he was the most powerful national defense force, a sharp weapon in their hands. If he died, it would be a pity. Moreover, Zhang Xiu was still so young, only 20 years old. If he grew for another 100 years, he would be able to protect Hua Nation's prosperity for another 100 years. There was news from the country that they would use all their power to ensure Mr. Zhang's safety. Little did they know that Zhang Luoxia had entered Dio Yutai and met with the big boss. He had talked with him as a demigod, so of course, the country would spare no effort. Dark Dragon, what do you plan to do? Dark Dragon began to pack his luggage and said, Go to the west. You guys don't go. It's too dangerous. No, no, no. You're our leader. How can we leave you alone? Dark Dragon said with a smile, This trip is dangerous and unpredictable. I can advance and retreat more freely alone. If you guys go with me, it will make me worry. You guys stay and be ready to help at any time. The door was pushed open and a handsome young man came in. It was the young man who took the photo. I just received news that after Mr. Zhang killed Li Ziji, a large number of martial cultivators from North Korea entered Galuya. They should be from Mr. Zhang. Yes, boss, you're going out. Dark Dragon said, I'm going to the west. His expression was very serious. The situation was not optimistic. Li Ziji was the heir of the Li family. If he was killed, the Li family would definitely not let it go. In fact, it was not just North Korea. Many martial cultivators from Hua Nation also entered Galuya. They smelled the smell of gunpowder, and even many people from Japan rushed over. In an instant, Galuya became a place of turmoil. At the time of the Feng Yun gathering, Zhang Xiu was currently sitting in the car, and the one driving was Long Yingqing. Her situation today was much better, and she was no longer sweating like before. Moreover, although her body was weak, she felt relaxed. In the past, she always had a feeling of being suppressed. Long Yingqing said, You're saying that the other party is using my life to extend his? Zhang Xiu said, To put it simply, that is indeed the case. This is also his goal. You often have heart palpitations and dizziness. First, there is a problem with your soul and body. Second, your life is draining too quickly. Long Ying-ching said, but I'm not aging quickly. Zhang Xiu said, this has nothing to do with old age. Aging is only a matter of time. The strength of your life force is two different concepts. There was one thing that Zhang Xiu did not mention. If Zhang Xiu had not taken out the remnant soul, Long Ying-ching would have died from starvation once her life force was drained. This kind of situation would increase with age. A child's life force was the most vigorous. After this age, it would slow down. At 28 years old, a person's life force would completely degenerate. At that time, Long Ying-ching would definitely die. In other words, even if she was lucky and did not die from starvation, she would not live past 28 years old. There was no free lunch in this world. The black-robed monk had saved her life, so he naturally had to pay a price. Your constitution is a bit special. When he helped Long Ying-ching cleanse her soul, he discovered that there was a mutation in her soul. If this was in the immortal martial continent, all the large sects would fight over it. Regardless of her cultivation talent, just this point alone meant that Long Ying-ching's achievements would not be low. Chapter 247. However, there was no way for him to cultivate here. Even he was incapable of doing so, let alone an ordinary mortal. If he had not coincidentally obtained the longevity stone talisman, he would not have been able to become a celestial so quickly. Given his previous rate of cultivation, it would have taken him 40 to 50 years. Long Ying-ching turned her head and looked at Zhang Xiu's marble-like face. She softly spat out, "Thank you." Zhang Xiu felt that it was a little strange. Thank me for what? Long Ying-ching said, I've seen it in the ancient Greek books. Regarding the so-called holy maiden, they all don't live long. The longest one is only 20 years old, so... Thank you. Zhang Xiu said, saving you was just a matter of convenience. However, Long Ying-ching knew that if Zhang Xiu was only dealing with a black-robed monk, there was no need for him to take out the remnant soul. He could have left it in her body. Perhaps it was just a matter of convenience, but it was better than not doing it. She said, in short, thank you. Zhang Xiu slightly raised a charming smile and said, I just want to intimidate Heaven Gate and let them know that I, Zhang Luoxia, am not someone to be trifled with. However, you said thank you too early. Soon, you will hate me to the bones. Long Ying-ching's expression changed. Are you really going to the sacred lands? Zhang Xiu said, of course. The car was already on the road. Zhang Xiu felt that there was something wrong with this girl's brain, asking such a boring and childish question. Zhang Luoxia was a man of his word. Long Ying-ching bit her red lips and said, it's best if you don't go. I'm not worried about you. I just feel that you helped me, so I'm reminding you that the sacred lands is not as simple as you think. If you go there, you will definitely die. Zhang Xiu said, will I definitely die? Long Ying-ching nodded her head. I've heard about your matter. The method you used to kill Li Zaiji is very powerful, and the method you used to kill the black-robed monk is even more unimaginable. However, all of these combined are definitely not a match for Heaven Gate. Even if you want to go against Elysium, you have to understand your opponent. As the saying goes, know thyself and know thy enemy, and you will never be defeated. Zhang Xiu laughed coldly. Long Ying-ching, don't try to use your ability to judge me. No matter how many schemes you have, in front of absolute power, you will only pale like paper. I will cut you down with my blade. Long Ying-ching said somewhat angrily, do you want to hear it or not? She had never tried to persuade someone with such sincerity, not even with Li Zaiji. In fact, Li Zaiji was a stranger to her. It was not that they had only spent a short time together. She had been in North Korea for 3 years. Logically speaking, she should be familiar with him. However, the conflict in her heart made her refuse to get to know this man. Because she knew that it was just a marriage of interest. Seeing the sadness in Long Ying-ching's eyes, Jiang Xiu seemed to see his own experience in the Jiang family. He had also fallen victim to a political marriage. Those people only cared about their own interests and had never thought about her life. Suddenly, Jiang Xiu felt a terrifying aura envelop him. At this moment, the car was speeding along at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. He was very curious as to what kind of expert the other party was to be able to lock onto him at such a speed. He looked back into the distance and his eyes suddenly widened. He almost cursed out, "Fuck." A wave of anger surged from his heart as he coldly said, "Ignorant, stupid." On top of an abandoned building in the distance, a man was actually holding a rocket launcher on his shoulder, aiming at him with a scope. In order to kill Jiang Luoxia, they were willing to do anything. It was the flat face of a North Korean. A sinister smile appeared on his face. Die. Boom. A powerful rocket launcher rushed out from the barrel under the powerful force. It spat out flames and shot towards the Land Rover that Jiang Xiu and the others were driving at an astonishing speed. Long Yingqing also heard the chi-chi sound. Turning her head to look, she was almost scared out of her wits. Seeing a rocket launcher flying towards her, she felt complete despair. This thing's power was enough to blow their mounts to pieces. Ah! She cried out in horror. Jiang Xiu firmly believed that the North Korean should be able to see Long Yingqing's face from the standard scope. Even if he couldn't see it clearly, he should know that Long Yingqing had been taken to the Holy Land by him. Using a rocket launcher in this kind of situation, not only did he want his life, but he also didn't care about Long Yingqing's life. Even if you don't consider that she was once your young mistress, she was still the young miss of the Long family. A cruel expression appeared on the sniper's face. Under normal circumstances, there would be a loud explosion and the car would be blown up. But in the next second, his face froze on the spot and he cried out, "How is this possible?" The rocket launcher that hit the car stopped in midair. Flames continued to spurt out from its butt, but it couldn't move an inch. It didn't detonate? The rocket launcher seemed to have a mind of its own. It turned around in the air and aimed at the sniper's current position. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he shouted, "Damn it!" Then, the rocket launcher rushed over as if it had been fired again. It was too fast. He immediately threw himself into the distance and made a prone posture. He was a top-notch martial artist in North Korea and a top-notch soldier king. He knew that at this moment, only by lying down would he have a chance of survival. Also, he couldn't directly touch the ground with his chest. That would be a mistake. The powerful vibration of the explosion would directly injure his internal organs. Many new recruits thought that lying down on the battlefield would be enough, but after the explosion, they would be flipped over and die with ashen faces and mouthfuls of blood. When lying down, they would definitely use their arms to support themselves. He had done this kind of prone posture no less than 10,000 times during his military service. Lying down on the spot, pouncing on the ground. But no matter how standard his movements were, it was all in vain. The power of modern thermal weapons was many times stronger than during World War II. Moreover, in order to deal with Jiang Luoxia, he had brought his most powerful weapon. It was powerful enough to destroy this abandoned building. Boom! The rocket launcher exploded with terrifying heat and pressure. The power of the explosion instantly destroyed the entire building. In his despair, he saw his flesh and blood being destroyed bit by bit. Fortunately, the process was very short. However, he didn't understand until he died that the missile had turned on its own. How could a demigod have such terrifying power? The most wronged were the other experts sent by the Li family in this building. They didn't even have time to show their skills before they were inexplicably killed by their own rocket launchers. There were as many as 13 people, the core of the Li family's combat strength. The collapse of the ruined building caused dust to fill the air. The huge movement caused the cups of water placed on the tables 10 miles away to ripple slightly due to the vibration. The car was almost sent flying by the heat wave. Jiang Xiu suddenly pressed down on it. The tires rubbed against the ground violently and slid 2 to 3 meters away. With a bang, the car window couldn't withstand the force and shattered. Jiang Xiu asked, "Are you okay?" Long Yingqing was still in a state of shock. Her beautiful eyes looked at Zhang Xiu in disbelief. Was he so powerful that the rocket launcher was like a child's toy in front of him? However, she rejoiced in her heart. If he hadn't been so powerful, she would have been blown to death. That damned Li family bastard actually didn't care about her life. In the smoke, the Land Rover rushed out. In the distance, a man slowly lowered his binoculars in horror. It was the Dark Dragon. He didn't expect the Li family to use weapons of this level. What was even more unexpected was that such firearms were like child's play in front of Zhang Luoxia. According to his intelligence, more than a dozen elites of the Li family had come to ambush Zhang Luoxia. Moreover, they were lurking on this road. Therefore, he had planned to provide support here. However, he now knew that everything was unnecessary. If he guessed correctly, more than a dozen elites of the Li family should be in that building. Moreover, they should all be buried with the building at this moment. It wasn't that they were too stupid to be wiped out. Instead, who would have thought that Zhang Luoxia was so powerful that he wasn't even afraid of rocket launchers? Mr. Zhang, are you really going to kill your way to the Holy Land? The mission he received from his superiors was to stop Zhang Luoxia from going to the Holy Land no matter what. He didn't know how to complete such a mission. Seeing the car drive away, he hurriedly appeared from the attic and drove after it. Mr. Zhang, don't do anything stupid. Chapter 248. Because of the explosion just now, not only was the glass damaged, but the entire motorcycle seemed to have a problem. After driving for more than 10 kilometers, it violently trembled and then stopped. Long Yingqing tried to start the engine several times but failed. She helplessly shook her head at Zhang Xiu and said, "No, the car is broken." She pushed open the door and lightly jumped out of the car. She pretended to open the car cover. In reality, Long Yingqing didn't understand cars at all, but she didn't want to show that she was bad. She was a very strong girl. Her pretty face turned cloudy, showing that she was very worried. She was still wearing a red dress today with black jeans. It perfectly outlined her waist, buttocks, and beautiful long legs. Because it was relatively cold in Gaul, her inner shirt was a white high-collared sweater. The sharp contrast between red and black was vividly reflected by the white, showing her peerless beauty. She angrily closed the car cover and said, "The engine is broken." This time, Long Yingqing was right. Zhang Xiu was a poor ghost in his previous life. Later on, he went to the immortal martial continent. There were many blind spots in his life. For example, he didn't know anything about car repair. There weren't many people in Gaul and the cities were far apart. There were no villages in front of him and no shops behind him. This was a bit troublesome. Zhang Xiu said, "I was wrong." He secretly regretted it in his heart. Just now, in order to save energy, he didn't forcefully resist the force of the rocket launcher's explosion. Instead, he let the car bear it by itself. He only pressed down on the car to prevent it from flying out. He didn't expect that a moment of laziness would cause the current trouble. Long Yingqing was confused when she heard this. She frowned and said, "Where did you go wrong?" Zhang Xiu said, "Letting such a beautiful girl stand on the side of the road, suffering the wind and sun, enduring inhuman treatment, isn't it wrong enough for me? I made a big mistake." Long Yingqing couldn't help but laugh. He really didn't think that the ice-cold Zhang Luoxia would tease her like this. For a moment, his heart was filled with sweetness. "You stinking poor." Long Yingqing went to the car and saw that the mineral water in the trunk was still intact. She took it out and handed it to Zhang Xiu. The relationship between the two of them eased substantially for the first time. However, don't worry too much. The direction of the Holy Land happens to be the famous Hula Bell Grass Mountain of Galuya. It's a very famous tourist attraction. Although it's remote, there are still people who often drive there. Zhang Xiu said, "No one will come for a while." Zhang Xiu's eyesight and hearing were amazing. There were no cars within a few miles. Long Yingqing said, "There's no other way, we can only wait." Of course, they could also call back and ask someone to drive over, but they had already been driving for 4 or 5 hours. Even if they sped over, it would still take 4 hours. Jiang Xiu looked at her and found that this girl wasn't tall. When she sneered, she was quite beautiful, especially with a bit of shyness. Her skin was especially tender and snow-white. Long Yingqing was a little nervous under his gaze. She reached out and tucked her drooping hair behind her ear. There was no one around, a man and a woman alone. This guy started to tease her again. He couldn't have missed him so much. Long Yingqing's pretty face turned red and her little heart tightened. I remember you have the strength of a black belt in Taekwondo? Long Yingqing said timidly, my strength as a black belt is still like a child in your eyes. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do if he wants to use force? I'm not his opponent at all. Is my pure body going to be ruined in his hands? She was so nervous that she tightly gripped the mineral water bottle. The mineral water bottle was squeezed out of shape by her. Jiang Xiu said, then your strength should be pretty good. You push the cart, I'll drive. Long Yingqing's pair of beautiful big eyes almost fell out. You're also a man? You have the nerve to let me, a delicate little girl, push the cart behind while you sit in the car. I can't believe this is real. I might as well let you have a good time. No wonder you were so good just now and even took the initiative to tease me. So you were waiting for me here. This bastard, I should have seen through his nature a long time ago. But when she remembered that he was Jiang Luoxia, she could only say, okay. Miss Long's black belt in Taekwondo was a combination of technique and strength, not brute force. Jiang Xiu tried to start the car again. Although he wasn't familiar with cars, he had seen it on TV. He might not be able to start the car, but after trying a few times, it seemed like he was just a little bit off. Long Yingqing came over and said, Jiang Xiu, how about you push the cart? I'll try. For the first time, Jiang Xiu agreed and said, okay, you go, I'll push you. Long Yingqing felt that this fellow's words had a different meaning, and her beautiful face couldn't help but heat up. She cursed in her heart, rogue, and looked at him shyly. She felt that she might have misunderstood. According to a brainless expert, girls were different from boys. When a girl was with a boy, she would always think in that direction, so she should have fallen in love with him. Long Yingqing, you can't have fallen in love with him, right? No, absolutely not. He was so annoying, so overbearing, and even threatened the Long family. How could she fall in love with him? Little did she know that an incomparably arrogant person like her yearned to be conquered even more than an ordinary girl. She didn't realize that her body and mind had already been conquered by Jiang Xiu. In the deepest part of her consciousness, she hoped that her body would also be conquered. Jiang Xiu pushed the car, and the car easily started moving. Long Yingqing tried to start the car a few times, but it didn't work, so it was possible that there was something wrong with the engine. He could only wait for the car to arrive. Long Yingqing asked, did you bring money? Jiang Xiu said, do you think I need to bring money when I go out? Long Yingqing was helpless. He could only retract his thumb and change it to a free ride. The car mercilessly sped past them. A young miss like her was used to not bringing money when she went out. After blocking the car for about half an hour, there were more than a dozen cars that passed by, but none of them stopped. Jiang Xiu frowned, and the next car did not stop, and directly hijacked the car. An off-road vehicle came from behind. It was a rather large model, a big Mercedes-Benz. Before they could stop the car, the other party had already approached them. Rolling down the window, it was a standard beautiful Chinese girl's face. Hey, are you Chinese? Yes. Long Yingqing said, our car is broken, can you give us a ride? The girl said, of course. Long Yingqing was overjoyed and pulled Jiang Xiu, wanting to show off. See, he was still stopped by me. She opened the back seat door and got in. The space in the car was very big, and the car was quite new. There were only 2 people in the car, and there was a boy in sportswear and glasses. From the looks of it, he should be an office worker, and the muscles on his face were more relaxed. The girl was about 20 years old, very beautiful, and looked very international. Her gaze sized up Jiang Xiu. Handsome, Are you going to Hulabelle Grass Mountain to play too? Zhang Xiu said, Play? Yes. The girl said, Do you come to Galuya occasionally, or do you live here all year round? She seemed to be very interested in Zhang Xiu. The boy on the side said sourly, Xiaoying, why are you asking so much? The one called Xiaoying said, I'm willing. Focus on driving, handsome. Ignore her. You haven't said anything yet? Zhang Xiu said, I come to Galuya occasionally. Xiaoying tilted her head and talked to Zhang Xiu. This girl was definitely very beautiful among normal people, but compared to the girls Zhang Xiu came in contact with, she was far inferior. Her gaze finally landed on Long Yingqing, and only then did she realize that this girl was actually so beautiful. She had a feeling of being shocked. Wow, little sister is very beautiful. Zhang Xiu, is she your girlfriend? Zhang Xiu said, No. We are normal classmates. Long Yingqing didn't say anything, and just quietly watched Xiaoying try her best to flirt with Zhang Xiu. Xiaoying said, Then do you have a girlfriend? Zhang Xiu said, I don't have a girlfriend. Long Yingqing sneered in her heart. You and Cheng Lingran are so close. If you aren't a girlfriend, then what are you? As expected, no matter how strong a man is, he is still a man, unable to move when he sees a girl. Xiaoying said, Don't joke, how can you not have a girlfriend when you are so handsome? Zhang Xiu smiled and didn't say anything. Only then did he notice that his face was in a deified state. He was now a god, and the most natural state was the deified state. Other than his eyes being normal, his entire person was like an ancient god, so handsome that no one would have any friends. Long Yingqing was probably flirting with him because of his great beauty. 3 hours later, the car drove to Hulabelle Grass Mountain. Zhang Xiu and Long Yingqing were about to get out of the car when Xiaoying said, Let's play together, the more the merrier. Zhang Xiu shook his head and said, No, we still have things to do. As thanks, I'll give you a piece of advice. It's not safe here, so leave as soon as possible to avoid losing your life. Chapter 249. Xiaoying didn't believe what Zhang Xiu said. Although Galua's security wasn't as good as China's, it shouldn't be that dangerous. She thought that Zhang Xiu wanted to get rid of her. After all, in terms of appearance, she couldn't compare to the girl beside him called Long Yingqing. Don't be like that. Let's play together. We even brought some barbecue. Zhang Xiu had already walked with Long Yingqing towards the Hulabelle Grass Mountain. The endless green mountain range stretched as far as the eye could see. Between the ups and downs, one could see the ruins of ruined castles. According to Galua's historical records, there had been 2 wars here. These castles were all destroyed on the battlefield. It had a heavy feeling of history. The boy beside her said, Xiaoying, forget it. He's already ignoring you. Why are you still going up to him? Xiaoying said, He's cool. What do you know? The boy said, What's the matter? He's just a little handsome. What's the big deal? In this day and age, it's all about background and family property. My family has a wine manor in Galua. Its market value is no less than 100 million. Xiaoying said, My parents want your money, but I don't. I just like handsome people. Appearance is justice. Do you understand? The boy muttered, I'm ugly. Is that my fault? Xiaoying's gaze followed Zhang Xiu's back view. She couldn't help but exclaim, He's too perfect. He's like the most perfect god that walked out of a fairy tale. The boy said, Xiaoying, you're too young. You're too deceived by superficial things. You'll grow old eventually. When you look at people, you must look at their talent. Talent won't age with age. Xiaoying said, Talent is something that I'll look at when I'm over 40 and become an old woman. The boy said, When you become an old woman, are you sure you won't like little fresh meat? Xiaoying couldn't answer. She felt that this possibility was really high. Appearance was everything. Xiaoying said, Jianrong, forget it. Give up. I won't like you. Even if I'm with you, I'll only like your money. I won't like you. The boy nodded excitedly and said, "If you like me, money is enough. I don't have any talent." Xiaoying rolled her eyes and ignored him. She got into the car and drove into the town. When they arrived, they were shocked. Red lines had been set up in many places, and armed men could be seen everywhere. There were too many cars and too many people. The cars were all luxury cars. Even their Mercedes-Benz was not enough. The news of Jiang Luoxia going to the Heavenly Gate by himself spread. Not only did the Li family of North Korea and the martial cultivators of North Korea who couldn't stand Jiang Luoxia, but there were also martial cultivators from China, Japan, Europe, Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. This was a serious matter. The number one demigod in China had charged to the heavenly gates. This had never happened before since the heavenly gates had appeared. There were probably no less than 50 demigods who had come. There were probably more than 10,000 people gathered in the small town today. The Golyuan Security Bureau was very nervous, and the experts of Golyua brought out all their armed forces. What's going on? Xiaoying was already stunned. She could not help but think of Zhang Xiu's words just now. The man was also stunned. "I've been here a few times, but I've never seen such a scene." Xiaoying said, "Is it a politician from some country who came here for a vacation?" The man looked around and saw that there were really good cars everywhere. There were also countless bodyguards in black suits surrounding the important people. He could not help but say, "This is really grand." Xiaoying said, "If I didn't know, I would have thought that there was going to be a war in Golyua." Someone on the side said to them in English, "Are you ordinary people?" Xiaoying said, "Aren't you?" The foreigner was stunned. "All right, it seems like you don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be a war of the gods here. If you're just ordinary people, you should leave quickly." Xiaoying almost laughed. "You're saying it as if it's real. A war of the gods? A war of the gods?" The foreigner said, "Something like that. A war of the gods is a confrontation between two sides. This time, it's one against all the gods." His eyes were filled with infatuation. Xiaoying said, "Are you serious?" Zhen Rong said, "You're joking, right, sir?" The foreigner smiled and did not say anything else. "What are they doing?" Not far away, a lot of machinery was moved over. There were even video cameras. In the sky, there were also cats making adjustments. The foreigner said, "Of course, they want to film this battle." The things that were filmed would be the absolute secret of each country. Xiaoying was not afraid of strangers at all. "Can I see it?" The foreigner pondered for a moment. He could not resist her curious gaze and wanted to show her some treasures. The main thing was that it had not started yet and they could not see anything, so she just let him be. However, Xiaoying was stunned when she saw the camera. Under the camera, a man and a woman were riding tall horses and galloping over the undulating grassy hills. "Isn't this? We know him." The foreigner smiled and said, "You two must be joking with me, right? You two know Jiang Luoxia?" Xiaoying said, "Jiang Luoxia. Damn, the handsome guy gave me a fake name. We really know each other. They came in my car. The girl next to him is called Long Long something." The foreigner's expression turned serious. "Long Ying Qing." "Yes, Long Ying Qing." The foreigner's gaze changed when he looked at Xiaoying. He held his head in an exaggerated manner. "Oh my God, you really know Jiang Luoxia? He came in your car?" Xiaoying asked carefully, "Is he really that amazing?" The foreigner almost broke down. "Do you know who started this unprecedented war of the gods? It's him. It's this guy. The powerful number one demigod in China." Demigod? In the video, Zhang Xiu felt that he was being spied on. He glanced around coldly and saw a miniature cat flying across the sky. With a wave of his hand, an invisible force shot out. With a bang, the cat was destroyed on the spot. Zhang Xiu and Long Ying Qing entered the mountain range and found that there were many people in the town. However, cars could not drive in the mountain range. Long Yingqing told Zhang Xiu that the Holy Land was still very far away. She had ridden a horse the last time she came, so the two of them went to the horse farm to rent a horse. Long Yingqing said, "It's too naive to try to use a cat to film. A cat can't fly to the Holy Land at all. Even if it can, it will be out of range." If it could be filmed, there was only one place that could do it, and that was the satellite hanging in space. In fact, the things captured by the satellite were much more than what the world knew. Long Yingqing said, "Are you really going in?" Zhang Xiu said, "Of course, don't ask such a stupid question." Long Yingqing said, "This is not stupid at all. Do you know how many experts there are?" "There are." Her voice stopped abruptly. She knew how powerful the Heaven's Gate was, but the Long family was also part of the Heaven's Gate. If she revealed the information about the Heaven's Gate, she would be betraying the Long family. "There are more than 20 demigods." But she still said it out loud. Long Yingqing said, "I heard that China is a forbidden area of the Heaven's Gate. The people of the Heaven's Gate don't dare to casually enter China, and because my Long family contributed to the founding of the country, we are the only exception. Even so, the demigods of my Long family can't stay in China, but live in Europe all year round. You can return to your country. There's no need to fight with them." Long Yingqing urged her horse to run wildly, trying her best to chase after Zhang Xiu while using all her strength to persuade him. Zhang Xiu's horse was unbelievably fast. His legs were strong and powerful, and his aura soared into the sky, as if he wanted to trample on the sun, moon, and stars. He said coldly, "It's too late. I'm already here. And they won't let me leave either." Following this voice, an off-road vehicle rushed out from inside. It was surrounded by undulating mountain ranges, and it was unknown how this off-road vehicle was brought in. A man from North Korea jumped down from the car. He was wearing a black suit and had a ferocious look on his face. "Long Yingqing, how dare you betray the Heaven's Gate and lure the enemy into the Holy Land? Die!" Zhang Xiu rushed over from the back of his horse. In a flash, he descended from the sky and directly stepped on his head. Together with the car, he directly sank into the mountain. That person's head was directly stepped into his body. China's Zhang Luoxia has arrived as promised. His voice was like a clap of thunder that exploded in the mountain range. It spread out in a mighty manner, causing the wind and clouds in the sky to surge and envelop the entire mountain range. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. Chapter 250. In the Elysium headquarters, the demigods were arguing fiercely. They were discussing the plan to kill Zhang Luoxia. The biggest problem was Long Yingqing's relationship. The Long family still cared about this daughter. Long Yingqing's appearance was outstanding, and she was talented. Whether it was staying in the Long family or getting married in the future, she would be very useful. The Long family's demigod dragon strongly opposed the plan to bury Long Yingqing. A battle between demigods was too destructive. He asked the Elysium to save Long Yingqing first. The North Korean demigod narrowed his eyes. "It is Long Yingqing's honor to sacrifice herself for the Elysium. My Zaiji is already dead. As his fiancée, shouldn't she be buried with him?" Long Zizong roared, "Bullshit. My great-granddaughter only has an engagement with your Li family, she hasn't married into your Li family. Even if she did marry into your Li family, you still don't have the right to make my monk grandson be buried with your descendants." The North Korean elder said angrily, "Long Zizong, Long Yingqing fell into Zhang Luoxia's hands. Do you think Zhang Luoxia will let her go? I'm afraid she has already been defiled. This is not only the shame of my Li family, but also the shame of your Long family. Death is the best ending for her. It is also the only way to protect the reputation of both our families." Long Zizong sneered. "What era is it now? Only a stubborn old man like you would care about this. Even if something really happened, Long Yingqing is still a victim. What's more, you're just shooting off your mouth. I think you only want to avenge Li Zaiji. You don't care about my great-granddaughter's life." A red-haired woman at the table finally found a chance to interrupt. All right, you two. Everyone knows how strong Zhang Luoxia is. First, he killed the unknown. Then, he killed the black-robed monk with the talisman. If we want to kill him, we don't even know how much we have to pay. Why are we still arguing here? We have to think of a perfect plan to kill him in one fell swoop. We can't let him escape back to China. Long Zizong, what is your great-granddaughter's life? You. Long Zizong's face was red with anger. All right, let's all calm down, an old European man said. Zhang Luoxia killed 2 of our Elysium's demigods in a row. This grudge is absolutely irreconcilable. If he doesn't die, our Elysium's reputation will definitely plummet. Right now, it is indeed as Serena said. We must not let him escape back to Hua Nation. We must win with one strike. As long as Long Zizong is willing to give up on his granddaughter, we can display our strength as we wish. No matter how strong Zhang Luoxia is, we can still crush him. A rough European man with a face full of stubble sneered coldly. Boom! A violent blast of air rushed in from the outside. The windows, doors, and glass all shattered. Everyone in the hall was shocked. The demigod of North Korea asked, "What's going on?" Outside, a European man ran in, scared out of his wits. He shouted, "Oh no, Zhang Luoxia is coming." What? The members of the Elysium were all extremely shocked. This was the headquarters of the Elysium, and no one had ever dared to barge in here with force since it was established hundreds of years ago. Zhang Luoxia really dares to come? Does he think that he can challenge all 23 demigods of the Elysium alone? They all rushed out, only to see that the sky outside was filled with dark clouds. The dark clouds covered the grassy mountains. A thunderous voice came from the horizon. I, Zhang Luoxia, have arrived as promised. They saw a man walking in with a majestic gait. Wherever he passed, the war horses neighed and the birds fled. Zhang Luo. At this moment, Zhang Luoxia's long hair swept up to the sky like flames. His clothes were fluttering in the wind. Lightning flashed in his eyes, and the entire world trembled because of his arrival. His aura was so powerful that it made people extremely fearful. The dark clouds in the sky and the grassy mountains thousands of miles away wailed under his aura. As he glanced around, it was as if he was looking down on the world. You've got guts. The one who angrily rebuked was the demigod of the Chow family. However, at this moment, facing the overwhelming aura of the spiritual cultivation, not only was his face full of shock, he even stuttered a little when he spoke. He had completely lost his previous awe-inspiring aura. A demigod who was not even 20 years old, a super demigod who killed Ji Wudao and was hailed as the #1 demigod in Huaxia. Although the Elysium was in Europe, because of the unknown people who were killed by him, they paid more attention to him. They had pictures of Zhang Xiu's appearance after he was deified. However, when they were face to face, they felt that Zhang Xiu's aura was so shocking. You really dare to come to my Elysium? Zhang Xiu said. I, Zhang Luoxia, am a man of my words. I said that I will destroy your Elysium. I will definitely not disappoint you. Arrogant! Long Zizong shouted angrily. Ignorant child, Elysium is not a place where you can behave atrociously. Who is your master? Hurry up and tell me. I want to ask him how he taught his disciple. Zhang Xiu's face was as cold as water. You are not worthy to ask for my master's name. Long Zizong was Chinese. He did not dare to say that he knew all the martial arts world in China. After all, he had left for many years. However, he knew most of them. He felt that it was possible to know them. Long Zizong saw Long Yingqing walking over with a pale face. She felt as if her soul had left her body. Her eyes were dull as she walked forward mechanically. She was really scared silly. No one knew what she saw when she followed Zhang Xiu into the sacred land. Only now did she truly realize what the name Zhang Luoxia represented. Long Zizong shouted, Yingqing, are you okay? Long Yingqing said, Old ancestor, I'm fine. Long Zizong said, Did he do anything to you? You still. It was a bit difficult to say. Although he said that he did not care, he was still a person from more than 100 years ago. He still cared. Long Ying-ching understood what the old ancestor meant and immediately shook her head. The demigod of North Korea said, Long Zizong, the older you get, the more backward you become. Would your great-granddaughter admit in public that she was? After that, he ignored Long Zizong's angry gaze and said, Jiang Luoxia, you dare to kill a disciple of the Li family of North Korea. How are you going to pay for this blood debt? Jiang Xiu sneered. Why? Do you think that the people who surpass the Li family are very precious? Killing them is like killing livestock. Look behind me. Wherever he passed, no one could stand there. Corpses were piled up in a sea of blood. It was a mess, especially the disciples of the Li family. Not a single one of their corpses was intact. Seeing the Azura battlefield in the distance, filled with the corpses of the Elysium disciples, the expressions of the Elysium demigods changed drastically. The demigod of North Korea was so angry that his entire body trembled. Good, very good. Since you dare to come to our Elysium, then don't blame us for relying on the demigods. Everyone, kill this thief and avenge the unknown black-robed monk and so many Elysium disciples who died. Jiang Xiu sneered, You're just a bunch of useless trash. You're courting death. The red-haired Serena suddenly clawed and pushed out. The nails on her fingers were bright red, like fresh blood. As she pushed out with her palm, a flame spurted out. She was not a natural-born mutant. On her 6th birthday, her house caught fire and her parents were burned to death. She saw a shadow in the flames. After grabbing it, she gained the power to control fire from then on. Later, she was adopted by a monastery in Goryeo. She found a way to control and increase her power in the scriptures. At the age of 18, she became the youngest wizard in Europe and the name of the fire god spread. Too weak. Jiang Xiu said, Without fuel, this kind of flame will extinguish on its own. As he spoke, he waved his hand and casually blew out a breeze. The color of the entire flame dimmed. With a bang, the flame disappeared without a trace as if it had lost its power. The demigods of Elysium were all shocked. This was Serena, who was known as the fire god in Europe. Her flame attack was broken just like that. The power of her claw was enough to blow up a big tree in the Holy Land. Shocking, everyone was shocked. With such strength, it was no wonder that so many disciples had been killed on the way here. In front of him, ordinary people were no different from ants. Long Ying-ching's eyes widened in shock. He could face a demigod so easily. Everyone, attack together. The demigods of North Korea saw that the situation was not right. Jiang Xiu was too powerful. It was difficult to win against him one-on-one. They had to attack together to prevent him from killing them one by one. In an instant, all the demigods attacked. There were strong lights, lightning, flames, and poison. Boom, boom. Every demigod's attack was very shocking. Among them, many of them revealed their deified state. There were all kinds of strange things and they erupted with destructive power. The demigods were like monsters that wanted to destroy the world, releasing the power that they had suppressed for many years. A demigod flew up to a tree in the distance like a bird and looked into the cave from above. It was empty. Blast him, blast him. The place where Jiang Xiu was standing was directly blasted into a 3 to 4 meter deep crater. Ha ha ha. Jiang Luoxia has been blasted into pieces. But before he could finish speaking, in the place where Jiang Xiu was just now, an invisible force gathered crazily. A dark shadow slowly walked out from inside. Behind him, there was a faint aura that rose. It was like fire and thunder, emitting a low rumbling sound. When they saw that person clearly, everyone's faces were filled with shock and despair. How? Chapter 251. External Release of Divine Power? The Elysium demigod's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They had not seen wrongly. Their attacks had all been neutralized by the flame-like aura on the surface of Jiang Xiu's body. It was definitely not an external release of inner force, nor was it a spell. How is this possible? The demigod from North Korea exclaimed. The demigods were also stunned. External release of divine power was like external release of internal force, but it was only possible in theory. It was like internal force that had reached the level of perfection and was able to release divine power. Zhang Luoxia had only been a demigod for a short while. How was it possible for him to be able to release divine power outside his body? What level of divine evolution have you reached? The demigod from North Korea could no longer remain calm. As far as he knew, divine power could not be released even in the 4th level. External release of divine power was like a cup filled with water, and he had only added a drop of water to the cup. How could he not be shocked by such a huge difference? Who cares what level he is in? Kill him. One of the demigods roared and leaped into the air. His body suddenly burst with intense white light, as if he had turned into a scorching sun. He slashed with a sword in his hand. It was Swordmaster Alpha, known as the Son of the Sun. Don't hold back, everyone. Attack together. Jiang Xiu smirked coldly and leaped into the air. Silver light kept flashing in front of his forehead, and the will of the blade emerged. He activated the seal in his hand, and countless golden runes gathered, forming a long blade in the void that looked like a blade pellet. One slash. The long blade swung, and the silver light burst, as if cutting the sky. It flashed in an instant. The will of the blade was indestructible. Before becoming a god, Jiang Xiu couldn't unleash his saber will. Now that his divine telekinesis was clear, he could stir up the void, and there were sabers everywhere. Wherever the sabers were, wherever the laws were, even gods would have to retreat, let alone a mere demigod who had only evolved 3 times. Ah! The ferocious look on Swordmaster Alpha's face turned into one of horror. He didn't even have time to scream. The sun god's sword that was famous in Europe was cut in half in the air. Even he was split in half in the air and exploded. It was destroyed like tofu. Alpha. The few demigods who were on good terms with him looked on with hatred. These people had gone through life and death with him. Before they became demigods, they had fought together to conquer the world. It had been more than 100 years. Now that they saw the sun's child being killed like this, how could they not grit their teeth in hatred? Furious chop fist. One by one, the European men, who were not very tall, suddenly leaped into the air. His entire body was surging with internal energy. His cloak was fluttering in the wind, and his body was emitting crackling sounds. His strength erupted like an angry dragon soaring into the sky. He threw a punch, and a white light flashed on his fist, faintly forming the shape of a sharp dagger. Good fist technique, condensing divine power into the form of a dagger. This move is not far from releasing divine power, right? It's enough to fight against him. Long Zizong exclaimed. A drop of water in a cup could be drunk, but how could it compare to a full cup? King of Assassins, kill him. The demigod of North Korea roared with bloodshot eyes. Brothers, support him. The King of Assassins was also confident in his furious chop fist. He was confident that even the representative of the demigods of Hua Nation, Si Wuxie, might not be able to last more than a few moves under his powerful fist technique. Moreover, there were so many demigods behind him, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Jiang Xiu calmly spat out, "Chop again." His eyes were cold and emotionless. The shadow of the blade glided past, carrying with it a spreading blade will. The blade will condensed and took shape, cutting the air inch by inch. It was as if the space had been cut in half. Light flashed, and even the space was dislocated. Puchi! The body of the King of Shadows was cut from head to toe by Jiang Xiu, like a knife cutting through tofu. There was no trace, and only a light was left in the mind of the King of Shadows. Ah! The King of Assassins glanced sideways and saw that his entire body had been cut in half. Instantly, he let out an extremely terrified scream. My body! He fell from the sky, dead. Everyone was shocked. Zhang Xiu had attacked twice so far, and each time he slashed a demigod, it was as if he was cutting melons and vegetables. Under the light of his blade, the demigods were as weak as ants in front of him. Even the king of assassins could not block a single attack from him. Terrifying, it was too terrifying. The demigods of Tianmen were all terrified. They had agreed to attack together, and they had agreed to wait for an opportunity to strike. At this moment, who was so stupid? In the current situation, whoever attacked would die. Their lives were not lives. The number one demigod of Hua Nation was so powerful. The Hua Nation satellite had received the signal of Tianmen Holy Land through communication with Galuya. At this time, the personnel on the satellite had already seen what was happening in front of them, and they were all stunned. Is this still human? The highest official ordered, immediately send the video back to the country. Also, contact the Defense Department. An old military officer appeared on the video of the Hua Nation's Defense Department. Prepare the satellite signal. No matter the situation, do not cut off the video. The highest official said, we are borrowing Galuya's signal. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the resolute old man from Hua Nation said sternly, the situation this time is not ordinary. Using our satellite system to directly enter Tianmen Holy Land, I will bear all the diplomatic pressure caused. Yes. He continued, inform the special personnel in Galuya to fully support Consultant Jiang. Regardless of the cost, ensure that he can safely return to the country. The Tianmen Holy Land had their own anti-satellite and anti-signal equipment. The phone could no longer be reached, so they could only use the satellite to contact them directly. Now, countless experts were rushing in, and the Dark Dragon was among the crowd. He had disguised himself as an old European man. Along the way, he saw the corpses of Tianmen disciples. It could be said that heads were rolling, and there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood. It was like a battlefield of Azura. This was all killed by Zhang Luoxia alone? Along the way, there were hundreds and thousands of corpses on the ground. Many of them were top experts in Europe, but they were killed mercilessly like small fries. Their lives were tragic, and their deaths were lowly. In front of Zhang Luoxia, the so-called European experts and so-called big shots were a joke. This time, the enmity between us and Tianmen is huge. If not, we won't rest until we die. The Dark Dragon's expression was solemn. He had never seen Zhang Luoxia so ruthless and decisive in his life. He did not leave any room for negotiation. The Europeans along the way were completely stunned. Oh my God! Is there a large-scale war here? In Europe, dozens or hundreds of people dying in a terrorist attack would be overturned. However, the death toll in Grass Mountain was probably more than 1,000 people, which was comparable to a medium-sized war in Europe. Killing one person was a crime, killing 10 people was a hero, and killing 100 people was a god of war. Lightning flashed in Zhang Xiu's eyes. He raised his hands high as if he was holding a sword, but the shape of the sword could not be seen. However, when he suddenly slashed down, everyone could clearly see a huge sword light that was more than 10 feet long slashing down from the sky. The sword light flashed, and under the blade, it was as if everything was being squeezed out, forming a vacuum state. Only the invisible sword intent was wreaking havoc inside. The void was filled with sword intent, and there was no place without a sword. Domain of the sword. Boom, boom, boom. Every strand of blade will was an invisible blade. Countless blade wills burst forth, and countless blades flashed. The terrifying destructive power was enough to destroy the heavens and the earth, wreaking havoc on everything. The strong light that burst out formed a hemispherical shape. Dodge quickly. Zhang Xiu softly said, the first volume of the Soul Book, Ingenious Sword Light Flow, a remnant spirit in a single thought. Kill, kill, kill. Boom. When the sword intent of the domain of the sword was at its peak, it suddenly exploded. Regardless of whether it was the castle, rocks, trees, or grass, everything was cut and destroyed. The demigods who were in the midst of it were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. Their bodies were pierced by countless sword intents, and their bodies were riddled with holes. Almost instantly, their limbs were sliced into pieces, and blood splattered everywhere. Descending 9 mysteries to cleanse the heavens, 1,000 years of hard work. A beam of light flashed rapidly, and Zhang Xiu had already arrived. He rushed out of the light, and the souls of the demigods from North Korea flew out. Zhang Luoxia's hair fluttered, and his eyes flashed with lightning. "Old man from the Li family, your life is here." "You?" The demigods from North Korea were scared out of their wits. Zhang Xiu's strength was too shocking. What kind of sorcery was this? Or was it martial arts? It was completely different. Its power was simply invincible. He didn't even have time to react. He felt a chill in his throat, as if a gust of wind blew in from outside. He realized that his throat might have been cut. The fear in his eyes slowly turned into hatred, but soon, the hatred turned into regret. He covered his throat, and there were gurgling sounds coming from inside. Blood kept spurting out. "Li Zaiji, what kind of enemy have you made for the Li family?" Chapter 252. Blood continued to flow from the gaps between his fingers. He could no longer hear anything other than the sound of flowing water. His vision gradually became blurry. Hua was not the only country that was paying attention to the incident through satellite. North Korea was also paying attention. The Li family played a very important role in North Korea's political scene. Seeing the North Korean demigod holding his throat and bleeding, the people in the North Korean satellite cabin looked on nervously. Will something happen to him? The North Korean demigod had many legends in North Korea. He was a godlike figure, and he gave the people of North Korea a lot of confidence and courage. He had a great name, Lee Jae-soo. "Lord Jae-soo," the North Korean astronaut exclaimed. They all thought that Lee Jae-soo had died long ago, but they did not expect him to still be alive. He was supporting the Lee family behind him, which was a rich and powerful family of North Korea. However, at that moment, Lee Jae-soo might be killed by a rising star from Hua. That was too difficult to accept. They would rather Lee Jae-soo die a glorious death on the battlefield than die in such a cowardly manner. But in the next moment, the expressions on their faces changed. They came to the big screen nervously. On the screen, Li Zaixio's frightened eyes slowly turned golden, like the eyes of a wild beast. Fine golden fur grew on her face. The wound on his throat, which he was holding, quickly began to heal. Deification. Furthermore, he had extremely strong recovery abilities after going deified. At the same time, Lee Jae-soo's body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. His hair fell off, and golden hair grew. His teeth became sharp. His body became full of vitality and was filled with great power. This, in front of the North Korean satellite signal, the people who saw this scene for the first time were shocked. Deification. The great Lord Lee Jae-soo has gone deified. One of the North Korean officers shouted excitedly. Deification. Yes. The North Korean military officer looked proud. Do you know what a demigod is? A true demigod is a mortal who has evolved into a god. They will have a different form from humans. This is called deification, and they will have unparalleled power. Just like the great Lord Li Zaixio, even if his throat was slit, he could still recover and survive. There were many legends about gods in North Korea, and most of those gods looked messy. There were foxes and monsters, and they quickly adapted to the changes in Li Zaixio's appearance. The astonishment in his eyes gradually turned into fanaticism. Lord Li Zaixio will definitely kill him in anger. They were eager for Li Zaixio to strike back at Zhang Xiu. Let the monkeys of China witness the prowess of our North Korean men. Li Zaixio's expression also changed. The sound of bones healing came from his broken throat, and he growled like a beast. Zhang Luoxia, you've angered me. His voice sounded like a series of roars. Zhang Xiu, on the other hand, could understand what he was saying. It was an elementary godly language, but his eyes were filled with disdain. Another godly evolution that had taken the wrong path. If he continued to evolve, he would become a monster. The second form of godly evolution. Long Zizong was shocked. In everyone's impression, Li Zixiu was only in the first form of godly evolution. He had actually hidden his strength. The difference between the two forms was enough to crush him. It was like the difference between the realms of martial artists. He survived Zhang Luoxia's attack. The demigods saw that Li Zixiu had survived, and their confidence increased 100 times. He had broken Zhang Xiu's killing intent, and it made them understand that Zhang Xiu was not that strong. Li Zixiu said, "Zhang Luoxia, you are not weak, but you chose the wrong opponent. Today you will die." Roar. Behind him, a huge gaseous figure of a giant ape was faintly formed. It roared angrily, and its roars rolled out in all directions. Reckless fist. Following this roar, Li Zixiu rose into the air and punched out. The force was so strong that it was as if the ape behind him was punching. It was as heavy as Mount Tai, and its strength was as great as 10,000 pounds. So strong. The people watching the North Korean video were so excited that they almost cheered in unison. The North Korean officer was so excited that he nodded his head. Just the power of that punch felt like it could destroy a small mountain. Too strong. Ancient Protoss. Zhang Xiu's eyes swept over, and he chuckled. "How dare a useless person like you make such a fuss here?" He laughed to himself. Brilliant sword light, with a thought from a remnant god. Fool. Kill. My sword Dao is not something that you can imagine. Zhang Xiu turned a blind eye to Li Zixiu's shocking punch that was filled with hatred. However, his voice suddenly changed, slowly changing from Chinese to divine language. It was profound and difficult to understand. Listening to it, one would only feel incomparably shocked and their hearts would go silent. Soul return. Li Zixiu, who was in the air, was stunned. Ice condense. Li Zixiu's body made cracking sounds, and his body was frozen into ice at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soul shatter. Countless sword will emerged from Li Zixiu's body. With a loud bang, his frozen body exploded on the spot, and countless sword light rushed out of his body. Boom! It shattered into pieces. Whoa! The people who witnessed this were all shocked. The old military officer in front of the video was stunned, and then he jumped up excitedly and shouted, "Good, good, good." He didn't know what was good about it, but it was good to be able to kill a strong enemy. The people of North Korea who were watching everything through the screens looked as if they had just lost their parents. They were all dumbfounded and felt as if they had been struck by lightning. Lord Li Zixiu, whom they had worshipped as a god, had been killed. The man who had wanted to show Zhang Xiu the strength of the men of North Korea was left with his mouth wide open and his lips trembling. How can that Hua man kill people just by talking? It was too shocking. His heart was beating wildly. He was not the only one. The demigods present, as well as others, were all shocked. Even the man in the 9-python robe was stunned. Humph! Zhang Xiu looked back, and there was a glow in his eyes. He was disdainful and killed them as if they were livestock. He glanced at the demigods present and said, "What are you going to do? We have so many demigods working together. Can't we kill a mere Zhang Luoxia? Everyone, take the initiative to attack and surround him." As soon as he finished speaking, the demigods in the field surrounded Zhang Xiu. Oh no! The old military officer in front of the video changed his expression. They won't be so shameless as to attack together, right? They are all demigods. Don't tell me they don't care about their identities? Meanwhile, scattered voices could be heard from the periphery. It seems to be right in front. The first batch of martial cultivators finally arrived and saw Zhang Xiu surrounded by more than 20 demigods. The battle was unusually intense, and many people were excited. They had finally arrived and had the chance to witness this shocking battle with their own eyes. This is too shameless. 20 demigods are surrounding Zhang Luoxia alone? Do the Elysium not care about their reputation anymore? The person who said this was the demigod from China, Lu Yunhai from the Copper Trigram sect in Wui. Haha, you're wrong. A man with thin lips on the side said. He had an Asian face and his Chinese was very difficult to pronounce. He sounded like a Japanese. In a battle of life and death, there's nothing you won't do. Your grandson from China once said that all's fair in war. The Dark Dragon had also arrived. When he saw the situation, he looked worried. 1 against 20, how could he fight? The number 1 demigod in China and number 3 on the demigod ranking list. The Dark Dragon believed that no one in the Elysium was a match for Zhang Luoxia in a one-on-one battle. However, this was not a competition for rankings, but a battle to the death. Zhang Luoxia is too arrogant, too arrogant. He charged into the heavenly gate alone, but in the end, he ended up being surrounded. Since ancient times, heroes have been tragic. Zhang Luoxia's long hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes flashed like lightning. At this moment, everyone's gaze was deeply attracted to him, and they were deeply shocked by his courage. However, Zhang Luoxia is very powerful, but he's still outnumbered. A foreigner could not tell where he was from, but he felt sorry for Zhang Luoxia. He dared to charge into the Elysium alone. This courage alone was enough to make them sign a contract. The commander of the military department looked at the scene on the screen, and his heart sank. It was too detestable to be surrounded and killed. Get the people over there to prepare. The preparations must be in place. As long as there's a 1 in a billion chance, we must not give up. Yes. Zhang Xiu was surrounded. Zhang Luoxia, you're indeed very strong, and your methods are amazing. However, you've underestimated the Elysium. There are more than 20 demigods in the Elysium, and many of them practice secret techniques that are incomparably mysterious. Everyone, don't hold back. Kill. All the demigods are feeling immense pressure. If we don't kill Zhang Luoxia first, we might become the next Li Zixio. Crimson Flame. Law of Darkness. Yin Yang Coiling Dragon. Countless fierce spells bombarded Zhang Xiu. The sky was filled with dazzling lights. Some soared into the sky, some flashed rapidly, and some moved forward like ghosts. They turned into fierce lights of different colors and charged toward Zhang Xiu. Hee hee. Zhang Xiu laughed contemptuously like a big boss. A fierce light flashed on his forehead, and the sword pellet flew out from his divine consciousness. He chanted an incantation. The second volume of the Soul Book, Cosmic Space Tribulation. Descend, crazy fool Xiao Xiao. Congealing wind and freezing air. Whoosh. An inch of cold light flashed past. When the cold light flashed past, the falling leaves in the sky stopped falling, and the weeds on the ground stopped moving. The demigods in the sky all got into an attacking posture, and even the people who were used to eating from afar stopped. It was as if time had stopped at this moment. Only that inch of light was shining. Chapter 253. That silver-white glittering radiance bloomed with unparalleled sharpness. It was as if any matter, no matter how hard it was, would be completely destroyed in front of it. After a flash, it disappeared into the distance. The air began to flow, the wind began to blow again, and the leaves began to fall. Everything seemed to have returned to how it was before, as if nothing had changed, but it also felt like everything had changed. Boom! Suddenly, without warning, there was a loud noise. The stop time seemed to be catching up. With a sudden increase in speed, it exploded under the blade intent enveloped by the radiance. The sky collapsed and the earth sank. The onlookers on the periphery only saw that after the radiance passed, the entire space exploded. The sky was filled with white light, and they could not open their eyes. They were only left with incomparable shock. In that instant, the entire world was silvery white, but then it was cut in half by the radiance, and there was a spatial dislocation. Oh my God! That's a missile explosion. When the people watching the video saw the huge explosion on the screen, they were so shocked that cold sweat slid down their foreheads. They could see more clearly because the video was taken from a bird's eye view. The area covered a radius of hundreds of meters. Other than nuclear bombs, even the largest caliber missiles could not see its back. And this was only one of the inch lights that Zhang Luoxi shot out. What the hell is this? Is it Blade Dao? Or magic? The onlookers were extremely shocked, and their bodies trembled. No matter how experienced and knowledgeable the old officer in front of the video was, he was dumbfounded at this moment. He exclaimed in his heart, "Is there such a thing?" A foreigner boasted of his excellent knowledge. "I once saw a great wizard who was good at psychic power. He could condense his psychic power into a substance and cut through the air, destroying everything. I think it's a little similar." The strong radiance gradually dissipated, and dust filled the sky. In the dark, bodies were cut in the air by the silver radiance, bringing out bright red blood, like rose petals fluttering in the dark night. Boom, boom, boom. Bodies fell to the ground one by one. Water God Bolton, Luchuan Jianxing, Crimson Wings. Each of them was a famous figure, but under the radiance, they did not know where their power came from or where it ended. There was no trace to follow. Since there was no trace, there was no way to defend. They could only helplessly let their lives be taken away in a moment of despair. Oh my God! The corpses in the sky fell from the sky like dumplings. Are they all demigods? They were all killed. Everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe that Zhang Luoxia had killed 20 demigods with a single move. This was explosive, completely explosive. The onlookers hugged their heads and paced back and forth on the spot, looking like they were at a loss of what to do. When they looked back at the scene, they jumped up and down. Because after confirming that it was actually real, it was still F*King real. Lu Yunhai, the demigod from China, was also stunned. As for the man from Re Nation, his eyes were dazed, and his soul seemed to have drifted away. The heads of state who were still nervously watching the situation through the satellite could no longer remain calm. They involuntarily stood up from their seats and moved closer to the computer screen. All of them were killed? The ground was littered with corpses and blood. These people were different from those outside. They were demigods. The Dark Dragon was also completely dumbfounded. He had always thought that Zhang Xiu was too radical and arrogant, and that this would eventually lead to a bitter end. However, he didn't expect himself to be the ignorant one. 20 demigods had joined forces and were killed by him. This was a slap in the face, and it hurt. However, he felt indescribably refreshed, and his blood surged with excitement. Zhang Luoxia, you're too awesome. At this moment, the entire underground world was shocked. They saw a bright light emitting from Zhang Luoxia's forehead. It was a 3-inch long light blade. It was extremely dazzling and mysterious, as if it had a mind of its own. He had released that small blade just now. He had killed all the demigods in the Elysium with a single blade. Zhang Luoxia, you're indeed not just a demigod. A voice came from not far away. A figure stood there, his long robe fluttering in the wind. This person had black hair and black eyes, and his robe was embroidered with 9 wild snakes. Wow! The crowd was in an uproar. Countless people watching the video widened their eyes. 9 wild robe, could this person be Elysium's leader? Zhang Xiu's gaze fell on the longevity stone talisman in his hand. So the longevity stone talisman is in your hands. Does this mean that you deliberately lured me to Europe? This wasn't hard to figure out. Unknown people had been killed by him, and China was a forbidden area of Elysium. They couldn't enter. If they wanted to take revenge, they could only lure him to Europe. Oh. Zhang Xiu was curious. You know that I'm not just a demigod? That person said, because I know that Ji Wudao isn't just a demigod. Since you can kill him, you're naturally not just a demigod. You should be a new god. Wow. Shocking, completely shocking. The crowd was in an uproar. Zhang Luoxia is a god. This was easy to understand why he dared to go to Elysium alone and kill 20 demigods. He was a god, an existence that could crush demigods. However, was there really a god in this world? Zhang Xiu felt that this person in front of him was a little familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Since you know that I'm a god, how dare you provoke me? Hee, Zhang Luoxia, you're too arrogant. The Elysium's leader laughed. If we were in China or elsewhere, I would be a little afraid of you. However, this is the Elysium Holy Land. I've been here for hundreds of years. How can I let you behave so atrociously? You're a god, but am I not? Boom, that person's body suddenly shook. A violent aura swept out like a gust of wind, condensing into an aura that was like fire and thunder behind him. His entire temperament had completely changed. Release of divine power. Both of them had the same power. Zhang Luoxia, what do you think? Zhang Xiu looked at him indifferently, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He knew who this person was. From the first time he saw this person, he felt that he had a strange look in his eyes and couldn't remember. However, when he thought of the longevity stone talisman, he finally remembered. However, his face was a standard Han Chinese face, so he wasn't a foreigner from the ancient desert city. Other than those people who had the longevity stone talisman and wore the clothes of a Ming dynasty prince, the identity of this man was obvious. He was Wang Chonglin, the general of the western region who led the soldiers to kill the ancient desert city. You're just a useless person. Wang Chonglin grimaced and stomped his right foot against the ground. The power of this stomp was truly astonishing, and the earth began to tremble. With his foot as the center, cracks began to spread out in all directions, causing the earth to rumble and groan. There was actually a strong light shining from below the ground. Formation, rise. At the same time, the fog in the sky surged. At first, it didn't feel much. After all, this was a very humid grassland. But later, the fog covered the entire sky. It was as if there was an additional layer of sky as far as the eye could see. He had spent a lot of effort and collected a lot of heavenly materials and earthly treasures to set up such a large formation underground. It was all for the sake of meeting a strong enemy one day. This formation could only be used 3 times in total. He had already used it once, and this was the second time. A formation? Zhang Xiu was a little surprised. Interesting. Interesting. A trace of anger flashed across Wang Chonglin's face. Zhang Luoxia, you're too arrogant. You still don't know that you're about to die. Zhang Xiu said, haha, communicating with the heavens and earth, storing wind and storing energy, and condensing the heavens and earth for one's own use. Indeed, even a god can be suppressed and killed. Since you know that, why don't you just surrender? Don't tell me you're thinking of using your body to resist the power of the heavens and earth within 100 miles? Wang Chonglin shouted angrily, trying to wake Zhang Xiu up. As he spoke, the entire mountain range began to shake, and there was a series of violent rumbles. The spectators on the outside could feel the ground shaking. The entire mountain range seemed to be swaying, as if it was about to collapse. Is this an earthquake? Many people's expressions changed drastically. Many of them were so scared that their faces turned pale. If there was really an earthquake, their lives were more important than watching the battle. I don't know. This is a formation passed down in Hua Nation. The Hua Nation demigod Lu Yunhai said. Formation? The Ri Nation martial cultivator murmured. He was no stranger to this term. It was also passed down in Ri Nation, but of course, it was also passed down from Hua Nation. 10,000 miles Tiger Soul suppressing formation. Chapter 254. Within the control room of the Hua Nation's military, there was complete silence, and the atmosphere became very oppressive. Originally, they thought that Zhang Luoxia had already won, but who would have thought that another unforeseen event would occur? The sect master of the Elysium was also a god, and he had a formation in his hands. Long Zizong, who had not made a move because his granddaughter had fallen into Zhang Xiu's hands and was dissatisfied with these people's neglect of Long Yingqing, said in a trembling voice, Jiang Luoxia, don't fight head-on. How can a mere mortal fight against the heavens and earth? How can you fight against the sect master? Surrender. We are both Chinese, and the sect master will definitely be lenient. Wang Chonglin nodded and said, Long Zizong is right. It would be a pity to kill a genius like you. As long as you surrender, you will be ranked second in the entire Elysium. He clearly knew that Zhang Xiu was a god, yet he still lured Zhang Xiu here. He was definitely not someone who had nothing better to do. He had long harbored the idea of subduing Zhang Xiu and using him for his own purposes. As long as Zhang Xiu nodded and surrendered, he would have no less than 100 ways to control Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu revealed an expression that was not a smile. You think you've already won? Spiritual cultivation did not require humans. In the immortal martial continent, where people ate people and used all sorts of methods, how could the peerless experts who had survived not see through Wang Chonglin's little trick? Once they submitted, it was not too difficult for a god to control others, whether it was through medicine, goo, or poison. You're hoping for a fluke? Wang Chonglin said, although gods can draw upon the power of the void for their own use and are said to be inexhaustible, Jiang Luoxia, you and I are both gods, so you should understand that this is just a bluff. Gods truly can draw upon the power of the void, but there is a limit to how much they can draw upon. The stronger they are, the more they can draw upon. Our strength is simply not enough to contend against this world. As he spoke, he activated the formation in his hand. Instantly, the fog in the sky began to churn, forming a huge cyclone that kept pressing down. Within the cyclone, there seemed to be silver lightning flashing incessantly. Wang Chonglin was like a god that controlled this part of the world. He angrily shouted, Jiang Luoxia, do you want to die or live? Even some of the spectators in the distance were forced to kneel to the ground in the face of such a powerful aura. It was too frightening. This was a real god. The sect master of the Elysium. At this point, everyone finally understood why Elysium had been able to stand tall in Europe for hundreds of years and had survived 2 world wars. It was even known as the Holy Land, and was forbidden land of the governments. So there were gods. Under the pressure of the fog, many people already found it difficult to breathe. The fierce wind that blew past their faces was like sharp knives, cutting open wounds on their faces. It must be known that they were still outside the formation. One could imagine how much pressure Zhang Xiu, who was inside the formation, was under. This is the power of your formation? Zhang Xiu was still as calm as ever. This power is enough to kill you. Jiang Luoxia, I'll ask you one last time. Do you want to die or live? Wang Chonglin said. Zhang Xiu said, of course I want to live, but my life is in my hands, not yours. Your life and death is in my hands. Arrogant. Wang Chonglin didn't have very high hopes for Zhang Xiu. After all, one could easily imagine the pride and aloofness of a god. It wasn't very likely that he would submit. Since that's the case, I'll slaughter a god today. Rumble. Rumble. Above the sky, the wind swept through the dark clouds. The whistling sound filled the heaven and earth, and continued to fall from the sky. The 100-year-old tree was crushed on the spot, and the high terrain of the mountain collapsed and fell apart. Jiang Luoxia, you asked for it. Then let this world become the tomb of a god. The faces of the spectators were already ashen, and their legs were trembling. They had never seen such heavenly power. Even tsunamis and earthquakes were not as powerful as this. Even the mountains collapsed. At this moment, the people who witnessed this scene were extremely shocked. The Chinese who were paying attention to Jiang Luoxia felt their hearts in their throats. Was he really going to die? He had already come this far. He had killed thousands of Elysium disciples and slaughtered 20 demigods, but in the end, he still could not cross the mountain that was Elysium. It was a pity. He could have ruled the world, but in the end, he still failed. However, the white light on Zhang Xiu's forehead flashed again, and the sword pellet flashed out of his divine essence again. As he kept chanting, countless characters condensed toward the sword pellet. It grew from a 3-inch short blade to a 4-foot long blade. Suddenly, the blade flashed. Jiang Xiu suddenly raised his head. Heaven-breaking slash! The blade flare on his forehead immediately soared into the sky and instantly extended to more than 10 feet long. Rumble! The huge blade flare slashed toward the sky. The flare of the blade flare burst out into an extremely dazzling white line in an instant. At this moment, all space, time, and matter turned into nothingness. The white line seemed to have cut the world in half. A crack was forcefully plowed through the sunken sky. Boom! The blade flare burst out and forcefully pushed open the sunken sky. Wind blades raged inside, thunder rumbled incessantly, and lightning flashed dazzlingly. It felt as if the sky had been split open, turning into 2 torrents that poured down. Oh my God! Long Zizong's eyes almost popped out. How is this possible? Wang Chonglin's expression changed drastically. This was a formation that gathered the power of heaven and earth within a radius of 100 miles. Zhang Luoxia definitely couldn't resist it. Even if he was a god, his divine power was limited and would be exhausted at some point. According to his cultivation, the power of a god could gather the power of 1 mile, but this formation gathered the power of 100 miles. It was simply unbelievable that he could forcefully split the formation with his own power. In other words, didn't it mean that the power of Jiang Xiu's blade was 100 times his own power? In fact, the difference between the power of 1 mile and the power of 100 miles was far more than 100 times. It was just like the difference between the power of a 1-meter tornado and the power of a 100-meter tornado was more than 100 times. It was difficult to estimate the magnitude of the difference. Everything in front of him had truly happened. Wang Chonglin could no longer remain calm. He cried out involuntarily, "What kind of blade technique is this?" Jiang Xiu said, "My methods are not something you can imagine." Wang Chonglin looked at the sky that had been forcefully split open, and his face turned green and white. His heart sank. Once the formation was broken, Jiang Luoxia's blade flare would come at him. He didn't dare to think about it. His body stiffened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Jiang Luoxia, I'll fight you to the death." As soon as he finished speaking, he gripped the longevity stone talisman in his hand. Suddenly, the stone talisman erupted with an intense light. He quickly chanted an incantation, and the sky rumbled once more. The crack in the sky healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, Wang Chonglin's black hair turned into white strands that danced wildly in the wind. Jiang Xiu revealed a helpless expression. "What, you no fear now? It's too late." Wang Chonglin's expression became abnormally demonic. He looked like a god or a demon. Jiang Xiu shook his head. Of course, it wasn't because he was afraid, but rather because he was a little disappointed. The heaven-shattering slash was something he had comprehended while cultivating the path of the sword. Although it had also split open the formation, there was still a difference between the sword and the saber. At first glance, it didn't seem like much, but after a long time, its power was insufficient. That was why Wang Chonglin had to repair the formation. Afraid? Jiang Xiu lightly shook his head. "Wang Chonglin, you slaughtered the people of the western regions who begged you in the ancient desert city. Today, I will bury you here." Wang Chonglin was shocked. "You know me? You even know about the ancient desert city? Who are you?" Jiang Xiu said, "I'm a demon from the underworld. I've come specifically to take you down to hell." Wang Chonglin, die. Wang Chonglin roared with laughter. "Jiang Luoxia, don't try to scare me. You're already an arrow at the end of its flight. You want to play psychological warfare with me? You can't affect me. I should be the one sending you to hell. Then die." Wang Chonglin was feeling pleased with himself, but the smile on his face suddenly froze. He saw Jiang Xiu's eyes slowly open. His eyes were pitch black, and at the same time, the divine inscriptions on his left arm finally erupted. Boom! A fierce light burst out from his body, like a pillar of light soaring into the sky. What is this? Wang Chonglin's heart trembled. He saw Jiang Xiu's hair billowing like flames, and his body was surrounded by light and wind. His entire body slowly rose into the air, like a god or demon. A rumbling sound could be heard in the distance, as if it came from ancient times. Roar! Spiritual cultivation glanced back, the lightning in his eyes restrained. He finally uttered the divine inscriptions. Chapter 255. When a divine glyph that had never been formed in this world appeared, the entire world seemed to have returned to the time when the earth was vast and desolate. There were no people, no trees, and no animals. This was the first sound in the world. Rumble, rumble, like the sound of thunder, the sound of rolling thunder came from afar. Before the Chi rainbow arrived, an overwhelming pressure had already descended from the sky. The thick fog condensed by the formation was immediately pressed down. The golden divine light inside was incomparably hot. Flames burned out, and the fog was instantly set ablaze. What is this? Wang Chonglin was terrified. The flames in the sky were too fast and too hot. In an instant, a large hole was burned in the fog of the formation. It was like the sun melting snow. Ah! When the flames shone on Wang Chonglin's body, he suddenly cried out. Everyone looked over in shock. The golden divine light suddenly gathered on his body and disappeared. Instantly, the flesh on his face, body, and arms instantly corroded and burned away. Soon, the eerie white bones under the flesh could be seen. Sect Master! Long Zizong cried out in alarm. This man that he regarded as the strongest was actually about to be defeated. Moreover, he might be killed by Zhang Xiu's mysterious glyph. Destroy my spirit essence! Wang Chonglin roared. Long Zizong naturally knew where the spirit essence was, but it was a vital point. If he destroyed it, he would die. But now was not the time to think. He immediately pulled out his sword and slashed. The sword stabbed toward his glabella. The tip of the sword had just arrived when it was charred black by the golden divine light. It turned into ashes and fell down along the body of the sword. Long Zizong paled in fright and hurriedly threw away his sword. What is this? His sword was a famous treasure sword that could easily cut open the body of a demigod. Unexpectedly, it was destroyed upon contact. Too terrifying. Ah! At this moment, the flesh on Wang Chonglin's body had been completely corroded away, and the lifeless skeleton beneath his feet began to crack and crack. Inch by inch, the skeleton crumbled and shattered to pieces. Zhang Luoxia, you will also be buried with me. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces paled. He was really frightened by Zhang Xiu's means. What exactly was that? Zhang Xiu was also incomparably astonished. No, it should be said that he was both shocked and elated. The first sound of the divine inscription he'd awakened was actually the first sound of the heavens and earth. Its might far exceeded his expectations. The 33 tones of heaven and earth, the 5 elements words, the 6 words mantra, the 9 words mantra, the 12 constellations words, and the first tone of heaven and earth. From this, it could be seen that the might of the first sound of heaven and earth was extraordinary. Regretfully, the first sound of heaven and earth was only the first sound of heaven and earth in this low-tier world. If it existed in the immortal martial continent, only immortal kings would be able to use it. Ha ha ha! Even so, he still laughed excitedly. A bunch of useless people. He raised his head abruptly and saw that the fog formed by the formation was still pressing down. Although the person in charge of the formation was dead, the formation had been completed. It was like a tornado, and the cause was probably just a small butterfly flapping its wings. Whether the butterfly died or not, it didn't matter. The power of heaven and earth within 100 miles was enough to crush this mountain range. Humph! Zhang Xiu smirked coldly. Do you think that I will die with you? Thinking of the cruel and ruthless smile on Wang Chong's face before he died, he suddenly rose into the air. You are too naive. You will never be able to see the scene of me being smashed into minced meat by the power of heaven and earth within 100 miles. Even if I die, you still won't be able to see it. The saber pellets that were constantly flashing above his head led him straight into the sky, rushing through the large hole that had been created by the divine patterns. His whole person was like a white rainbow that pierced through heaven and earth, rising slowly as if a god had returned to immortality. Boom! First strike. It was as if dozens of tons of bombs had exploded above the great formation, and boundless waves of air rushed into the distance. The people below saw a massive white scar appear, and they could vaguely see a huge saber that was several hundred meters long. Second strike. Another white scar flashed in the sky. Third strike. Although they didn't know what Jiang Xiu was doing, a figure in the sky was waving a 100-meter-long saber and continuously slashing down. That domineering aura was really like that of a god, and it was really incomparably shocking. Fourth strike. The figure flashed, and saber light filled the sky. From the satellite system in the sky, they could vaguely see that the saber light had formed some kind of huge pattern in the fog. This pattern was very complicated, and it was connected bit by bit, profound and difficult to understand. Break! Jiang Xiu said, and no longer looked behind him. He was led by the saber pellets into the sky, and fierce saber light suddenly exploded in the fog of the formation. Boom! It felt as if the entire sky was trembling, and the fierce saber light exploded with unparalleled destructive power. As the saber chi was activated, the sky collapsed and the earth caved in, killing everything. All of the time, space, and matter were pushed out of the space. Saber intent was the technique, and infinity was the will. Saber formation broke the formation. The entire sky continued to tremble violently, and in the fog below, countless saber lights were killing each other inch by inch. Boom, boom, crackle, crackle. The sounds kept coming. Meanwhile, the people on the ground all raised their heads to look at the sky in horror. At this moment, they really felt as if the sky was about to collapse. This is heaven's might. The Hua nation demigod Lu Yunhai was extremely shocked. Seeing this battle today, I have no regrets even if I die. His eyes were unconsciously filled with tears. The Japanese martial cultivator's legs went weak, and he fell to his knees with a thud. He looked up at the sky like a devout believer, and the foreigners around him had all become wooden statues. This kid is strong, isn't he? Dragon Zizong was also mumbling to himself. Flying in the sky, slashing the fog with his saber, and using his own strength to resist the power of heaven and earth within 100 miles. Such ability was truly like a god descending to the mortal world. Swoosh! Boom! The saber formation was activated, and countless saber lights were produced. Under the waves of killing, the fog of the formation became thinner and thinner. The light in the sky slowly shone through the fog, and the sky brightened up. Boom! After the last tremor, everyone's fog seemed to have lost its last bit of strength, and it could no longer hold on. The wind from afar blew it away. This catastrophe was finally averted. Once the formation was detonated, not only the people around, but also any living thing within 100 miles would not be able to survive. Even Jiang Xiu himself might not be able to survive. The fog dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the world was lit up again. A figure appeared beside Wang Chonglin. It was Jiang Xiu. He reached out and picked up the longevity stone talisman that had fallen to the ground. There was another one in the bone rack. You tried so hard to lure me here with the longevity stone talisman. You should be satisfied now, right? There were 2 longevity stone talismans. After refining them, the power of the saber pill would definitely increase greatly. This trip to Europe was not in vain. What are you going to do? Jiang Xiu glanced at the last standing demigod of the Elysium, Dragon Zizong. I pay my respects to Mr. Jiang. Dragon Zizong hurriedly bowed. Jiang Xiu put his hands behind his back. I've never wanted a life for a life. Instead, I want his entire family. Dragon Zizong's expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with fear. Mr. Jiang, please spare my life. You've destroyed the Elysium, and even the sect master is dead. The dragon family will never dare to go against you again. In the distance, Long Yingqing was so nervous that her heart was about to stop. She wanted to run over and ask for a marriage for the ancestor, but she knew in her heart that it would not work at all. Jiang Xiu looked at Dragon Zizong indifferently and said after a moment of silence, "Go. I'm not sparing you because I'm merciful. It's because you haven't attacked me since I came to the Elysium." Dragon Zizong was overjoyed. "Thank you, Mr. Jiang." Phew. In front of the satellite signal of Hua Nation, the old officer and the others all breathed a sigh of relief. Then they were ecstatic. They won, they won. This victory was really significant to Hua Nation. "Mr. Jiang, you really annihilated Elysium alone." The dark dragon sighed in the distance as he looked at the mountains of corpses and seas of blood on the ground. What kind of strength was this? He had completely annihilated the forces that had stood in Europe for hundreds of years and caused headaches for all countries. 9 mysteries descended to wash the heavens. 1,000 years of hard work. Even without a square inch, he was still outstanding. From now on, Zhang Luoxia's name would shock the world. "I've been slapped in the face again, haha." The shock in the dark dragon's heart could not be calmed down for a long time. The measures he had arranged for rescue were all useless. It was a waste of effort. However, it was much better to not use them than to use them. From now on, Zhang Luoxia's name would not be on the demigod list because he was an existence that surpassed the demigod realm. Chapter 256. The news of the Elysium being destroyed by Zhang Luoxia spread throughout the underground world like a hurricane, especially on the Chinese martial arts forum. Anyone who knew about the Elysium knew what kind of existence it was. There were 23 branches of the Elysium, and they spread all over the world. Each branch had a demigod overseeing it. In the underground world, especially in Europe, the Elysium could be said to be a legendary existence. The words of the Elysium sect master were more effective than the words of the European Union's president. They were also one of the few giants in the world. However, such a giant had been destroyed by Zhang Luoxia. Many Chinese martial arts cultivators were so excited when they heard the news that they couldn't control themselves. The Elysium sect had raised the prestige of China and deterred the evildoers everywhere. Some people said that Zhang Luoxia should be ranked first on the demigod list and that he deserved it. However, the Chinese martial arts world was in an uproar. Zhang Luoxia was a god. Wow, this news was really incredible. Gods were legendary existences. They were a species from another dimension. How could they exist in this world? Immediately, some people expressed their doubts. Zhang Luoxia is a god. Is this confirmed? Someone confronted them head-on. One person killed 23 demigods. Isn't this the best proof? When this news was posted, the number of likes instantly exceeded 300. That person retorted, "Maybe Zhang Luoxia's evolved form is higher?" When this post was posted, it received 53 likes and 123 dislikes. Although this person's words made some sense, the people still hoped that Zhang Xiu was a god. People's wishes were always good. Somewhere in China, an old man was also browsing the forum with the help of his grandson. There are many fourth form demigods in the Elysium, let alone the third form and second form. With so many demigods, it's impossible for a high-level deified form to deal with them unless they have power that surpasses their level. Zhang Luoxia is most likely a god. Stomp on this person. Okay, Grandpa. Poster. It has been confirmed that Zhang Luoxia is a god. The Elysium sect master that he killed was also a god. Someone asked, "Where did the news come from?" "Who are you? How do you know so much?" The poster went missing. This did not reduce the popularity of the forum at all. Instead, it became even more popular. While the Chinese martial arts fist was in an uproar, the various factions of the Heavenly Gates were already in an uproar. In the top floor of an extremely luxurious modern building in the capital of North Korea, the clan leader of the Li clan received the news and felt dizzy. The Li clan had made countless enemies in North Korea, relying entirely on the demigod in the clan and the Elysium forces behind them. Now that the Elysium had collapsed, The clan leader dared not imagine what would happen next. Patriarch, what's wrong? Seeing his incomparably tough patriarch almost fall, the subordinate hurriedly reached out to support him. It's over. My Li family is finished. The Li clan had been arrogant in the imperial state for too long and had defeated many opponents who wanted to replace them. Without the support of the Elysium Gate, the Li clan had no way of contending with those people. Similar to the Li family, there was also the powerful network of forces under the Elysium. Japan, Southeast Asia, the countries of the European Union. 23 wealthy families were about to face a disaster. Just as Zhang Xiu was about to leave, he discovered a strange Yin soul energy. He glanced over, only to see a grey shadow flashing before it disappeared into the distance. What was that? Zhang Xiu turned his gaze to the corpses of demigods on the ground. Although they were all demigods, they were already advancing toward the Protoss and might possess some inconceivable strength. Including Wang Chong's skeleton and Long Zizong's, all the corpses were present. Zhang Xiu noticed that the corpse of a European man was the most complete. He had not been dismembered by the Inch of Light's energy. This man was extremely handsome and had a head of golden hair. He slowly walked over and reached out to touch it. A fierce gust of wind blew over, and the man's body suddenly burst into flames. Zhang Xiu was astonished. How could a corpse catch fire when blown by the wind? Moreover, from the way the corpse burned, it seemed to be hollow inside. The corpse quickly burned to ash and was blown away by the wind. Yin soul leaving the body? Yin Yang dual fate? Zhang Xiu was shocked. This person was just a demigod, but the bloodline he awakened was actually so noble. The noble bloodline he spoke of was not the so-called noble bloodline on Earth. It did not refer to one's birth in the royal family or one's birth, but to one's bloodline. In the immortal martial continent, the noble bloodline referred to the moment one was born. One's strength was far greater than others. For example, a drop of one's blood could allow a low-level god to instantly advance. And this so-called yin-yang dual fate was a type of powerful Protoss bloodline. When day and night alternated, he would be revived. It was a top-notch Protoss bloodline below the Protoss bloodline. It could be said to be noble. Zhang Xiu was also very envious of the yin-yang Protoss. When day and night alternated, their strength would increase. Even the lazy yin-yang Protoss was powerful enough to make one's hair stand on end. However, this race's inheritance was very difficult. Just like many powerful Protoss, the stronger the race, the harder it was to reproduce. I didn't expect to meet the yin-yang Protoss here. Zhang Xiu's gaze turned cold. Then all the more I can't let you live. If he killed him today, he would definitely come for revenge in the future when his strength increased. Who is this person? Long Zizong said, King Alexander. What's wrong? Zhang Xiu said, he's not dead. Long Zizong hesitated, but still said, it's said that King Alexander has a defensive divine artifact on him called the Yin-Yang Dual Dragon. No one can break through his defenses. Divine artifact Yin-Yang Dual Dragon? So it was just a divine artifact. He really thought that he had met the Yin-Yang Protoss here. Speaking of which, if he had awakened a Yin-Yang Protoss, he would have become a god long ago. Zhang Xiu said, where is King Alexander's lair? According to his speculation, the Yin-Yang Dual Dragon should have separated King Alexander from his body and given him a new body. However, after such a heaven-defying method, his body would be greatly damaged and he would have to find a place to recuperate. According to human instincts, when he was at his weakest, he would definitely return to the place he was most familiar with and considered the safest, and that was his lair. Southern Europe. Long Zizong asked flatteringly, do you want me to take you there? Zhang Xiu said, no need, just give me the location. King Alexander had just escaped. Zhang Xiu was confident in himself. As long as the direction was right, he should be able to catch up quickly. He took a few steps forward and chased after the force in the blink of an eye. He passed through mountains, forests, and rivers. Under Zhang Xiu's feet, No matter how dangerous the terrain was, it was as if he was walking on flat ground. The fisherman on the river saw Jiang Xiu walking directly over the water and screamed in fear. At the edge of the cliff, he was also flying in the air. At this time, Hua received a call from America, strongly urging Zhang Luoxia to stop chasing after King Alexander. As for the reason, it was obvious that King Alexander had offered America a huge amount of benefits. Now, his only chance of survival was to put pressure on the Chinese government through Smith Barney. He wanted the Chinese government to come forward and persuade Zhang Luoxia to kill him. Hua was still very weak in terms of diplomacy, especially when facing America. Most of the time, they could only yield. There was no other reason than that they were developing their economy all over the country and could not afford to be hurt. Moreover, they were no match for America. If you could not beat them, you could only compromise. However, on this matter, the Chinese side immediately rejected it. It wasn't that they were unwilling. If they could get some benefits from Smith Barney, it would be fine. The problem now was that they couldn't contact Jiang Xiu at all. In any case, they couldn't contact Zhang Luoxia, so they simply rejected it. Moreover, they took the opportunity to be very tough. There was no other reason. They were now awesome. Hua was a god. It was that simple. In an office in Smith Barney, a crazy and bold idea began to form among them. We can't sit back and watch Hua grow. Yes. They should be punished. On a glacier in Eastern Europe, King Alexander was powerless to escape. Dear sir, please let me go. In the few minutes before I died, I learned a secret. I can tell you. King Alexander in front of him was still as handsome as ever. However, his skin was very white, so white that it was a little transparent. Zhang Xiu said, I'm not interested. I just want you to die. A necklace dangled from King Alexander's finger. It should be the Yin-Yang twin dragons, but there was only one dragon left. If he had not been killed by Zhang Xiu, he would never have known the true use of this necklace. The holy maiden fell into the water. The divine punishment fell on the gate of heaven. When the twin dragons disintegrated, it was neither yin nor yang. Chapter 257. On the frozen river, the cold wind was as sharp as a knife. The handsome King Alexander fell onto the ice. Just as he was about to finish his fourth round, he fell without warning, dragging the yin-yang coiling dragon necklace in his hand. He sank to the bottom of the icy river, the necklace emitting a faint light. What a pity! Zhang Xiu looked at King Alexander's corpse and shook his head. Fortunately, the secret book of heaven was a creation of heaven and earth. If used well, one's achievements would be limitless. It could be said that it was a sign of becoming a god. Unfortunately, he had committed the most taboo, revealing the secrets of heaven, and was punished by heaven. But the yin-yang coiling dragon necklace is so powerful that it could reveal the secrets of heaven after his death. It must be something extraordinary. Zhang Xiu looked into the water. The necklace emitted a faint glow in the water. It was easy to find. He was about to enter the water when suddenly, the glow of the necklace dimmed, and the yin-yang coiling dragon necklace disappeared. It disappeared into thin air right under Zhang Xiu's nose. Strange. Zhang Xiu could not be mistaken. He could see the bottom of the water. The necklace had indeed disappeared into thin air. It seemed that the necklace did not belong to this world. It had returned to the world it came from. It was such a pity. It was such a magical item. After calming himself down, Zhang Xiu realized that he was lost. Along the way, he did not know where he was. There were no other people here. He believed that they might be near Siberia. After a great battle, it was not difficult to deal with more than 20 demigods. The main problem was that the sword formation had almost exhausted all of his divine power. Coupled with the pursuit, he was now overcome with fatigue. But there was no village in front of him. Zhang Xiu had no choice but to find a place to rest and recover. He walked for a long time without seeing anyone. On the surface of the river, he saw an ice cellar. It was a small house made of ice when people camped out in the wild. For them, it could save their lives. For Zhang Xiu, it could also help him keep out the cold. Thus, he simply went in. Zhang Xiu began to meditate. He could not help but take out the 2 longevity stone talismans. He placed them in his hands and began to refine them. The first step of sword cultivation was to condense the sword pill. The second step was to raise the sword pill. The materials used were treasures of heaven and earth like the longevity stone talismans. Now that he was a god, it was much faster and safer for him to refine it than before. For a sword cultivator, the power of the sword pill largely determined his combat strength. It was the foundation of everything for a sword cultivator. Only with a solid foundation could one build tall buildings. Hopefully one day, I'll be able to create a soul mutation. This was Zhang Xiu's dream. In his previous life, he was a sword cultivator. Although his sword cultivation was extremely high, to the point of being able to defeat sword cultivators of the same level who had mutated their sword souls, he had never been able to develop a sword soul. It was a pity that he was unable to mutate his soul. His friends and himself all said that the time was not right, but it was not impossible. After all, his achievements as a sword cultivator were there for all to see. However, Zhang Xiu knew in his heart that because of that little bit of unease in his sword cultivation, it had triggered a demon in his heart that he had never been able to overcome. Now that he was using the sword, he felt a sense of ease. When he returned to the immortal martial continent in the future, he would definitely go to the Xuanji stone to test his compatibility with the sword. He did not know how long he had been meditating. When he had completely refined and absorbed the 2 longevity stone talismans, the sword pill in his divine origin had more than doubled in size. The light it emitted was also clearer. Let's give it a try. White light flashed on his forehead. Sword light flashed, and with a whoosh, he charged out of the ice house. The sword light pulled him up into the sky. He seemed to have turned into a beam of white light that shot up into the sky. Wah! Awesome! Immediately, he felt like a bird gun had been replaced with a cannon. If he had been driving an Alto in the past, now he felt like he was driving a Ferrari. He felt like he had regained some of the feeling of being able to command the immortal martial continent. However, the burden on his body was still a little heavy. He floated back to the ground. It seems like these 4 longevity stone talismans have a strange resonance with each other. Although there were no substantial changes or improvements, the saintess statue in the ancient desert city had placed a total of 6 longevity stone talismans. This meant that the longevity stone talismans must have a unique function, and this function was very likely to require 6 of them. My divine body also seems to have strengthened a little. Although the sword pill was nourished, it was still a part of his body. The strengthening of the sword pill had strengthened his divine body as well. However, it did not increase the number of divine marks. The path of divine cultivation was divided into Spirit Severing Stage, Earth God, Sky God, Divine King. Gods were divided into 3 levels: Lower God, Middle God, and Higher God. Currently, he already had the strength of a peak Lower God. Zhang Xiu's current goal was to become an Earth God, break free from the shackles of the Earth, enter the universe, and embark on the path back to the immortal martial continent. This path was still long, and it would be extremely difficult to achieve in the short term. As for Sky God, they were much more powerful. They could travel through the universe and come and go as they pleased. There was no need to think about it now. Only after becoming an Earth God and returning to the immortal martial continent would he have a chance to break through to Sky God. As for Divine King, there was no need to think about it. Gods focused on awakening their bloodline and merging with the laws of heaven and earth, while immortals focused on comprehending the great Tao. From a certain perspective, the two were completely different, but they also led to the same goal. It's really troublesome to improve my strength. According to the immortal martial continent, as long as one had enough talent, worked hard, and had the right opportunity, there was a high chance of becoming an Earth God. However, on Earth, the spiritual energy was exhausted. If one only relied on awakening their Protoss bloodline, there was no guarantee that they would be stuck one day, and stuck until they died. He would not be stuck until he died. After all, Jian Yi had sent him the things he needed for cultivation. However, that would take more than 300 years. To him, that was no different from dying. Would he just sit there and become a living fossil? He was now looking forward to the shocking prophecy that King Alexander had made at the last moment. Unfortunately, he did not manage to make it in time and was killed by the wrath of the heavens. The Saintess falls into the water, the heavenly gates fall, when the two dragons disintegrate, the world is neither yin nor yang. Zhang Xiu was not an ordinary person. He had lived 2 lives, and to a large extent, he knew about the future. He remembered that in his previous life, there was a rumor that the end of the world would come in 2012. It was quite intense, and many people believed it. However, in the end of the world did not come. As for what happened, why did so many linguists say that the end of the world would come? But it was fine as long as the result was good. But now, Zhang Xiu felt that the future must have changed. King Alexander's death was proof. What he said should be true. Otherwise, he would not have died from the wrath of the heavens. World is neither yin nor yang. Zhang Xiu was looking forward to the changes in this world. It would be best if it returned to the past, or if it produced spiritual energy. He had read in a book in the immortal Martial Continent that a similar low-level planet had a hole in the sky, and spiritual energy from the outside world suddenly poured in. Then, that planet's ecological direction was forcibly changed from one of science and technology to one of cultivation. If that was the case, he felt that it was not bad. If that was the case, he was confident that he could enter the Earth God realm before 100 years, break through the shackles of the Earth, and return to the immortal Martial Continent. The affairs of the world are impermanent and unpredictable. Grasping the present is the right path. After saying that, Zhang Xiu shamelessly sat down and began to cultivate. He didn't know how long he had been cultivating. Based on the current situation, Zhang Xiu's cultivation progress was very slow. Most of the time, he was purifying the divine power in his body. The advantage of this was that his foundation was very solid. The foundation of cultivation was very important. If the foundation was not solid, it would be easy to drop in cultivation level if injured. If the body was not suitable, it would also drop in cultivation level if injured. In short, he was looking for an excuse to cultivate. More than a month later, at the edge of the Duck River, a couple was fishing by the river when they saw a dark shadow slowly flowing under the ice. The old woman was immediately shocked. "Oh my God, old man, look at what's under the ice." The old man stared for a long time. "It's a person, a corpse." He called the 7 li 8 villages over, broke the surface of the water, and fished up the frozen corpse. It was Zhang Xiu, who was obsessed with cultivation. He aimed at the location and jumped into the river, then began to drift freely. He himself did not know how many places he had passed through. Chapter 258. They hurriedly fished Zhang Xiu out of the river. The villagers would never have thought that this guy would shamelessly drift all the way back from Eastern Europe. They thought that he had slipped and fallen into the water somewhere nearby. Is he still breathing? How can he still be breathing? I don't know how long he has soaked in the ice river. He should have stopped breathing long ago. What a pity. What a handsome boy. The group of people looked at each other. A middle-aged man among them asked, "Why don't we call the police and let them come over to deal with it?" "Wait." The old lady reached out and touched Zhang Xiu. Her eyes widened as she said, "His body is still warm. He's still alive." She felt that it was a pity that Zhang Xiu had died. Holding a glimmer of hope, she tried it and really felt that there was a body temperature. Forget it. He has been soaked in the water for so long that he has frozen into a popsicle. The old lady insisted, "It's really warm. If you don't believe me, you can touch it." The few people on the side saw that she was serious and all went over to touch it. Everyone's faces changed. Not to mention whether it was warm or not, his body was definitely not stiff. It was still soft. On such a cold day, he would definitely be completely frozen after falling into the water for an hour. He's really alive. Hurry. The group of people hurriedly carried Jiang Xiu to the village. However, just as they carried him to the entrance of the village and sent someone to call the doctor and prepare to hang him up with saline, the shameless guy opened his eyes and found that he was carried into the house by a group of rough men. They were taking off his clothes in a flurry. How could this be? He immediately roared, "What are you doing? F***CK. Everyone in the room was startled. They were so startled that they jumped up. An old man who couldn't help and was sitting on the bench eating melon seeds fell off the bench with his butt. "Oh, you're awake. We're saving you?" Jiang Xiu then realized that these people shouldn't have any bad intentions. It was very likely that he was found by this group of people when he was drifting in the water and then saved on the shore. He immediately put on a good face and said, I'm fine." He quickly stood up. The old lady said, "Your clothes are all wet. Hurry up and change, or you'll get sick from the cold." After hearing what Jiang Xiu said, Jiang Xiu really felt chilly. Like humans, the body of a god needed heat to resist the cold. However, this degree of coldness could no longer hurt Jiang Xiu. He said, "Is there anything to eat?" Yes. Jiang Xiu took off his coat and leaned against the stove. The old lady scooped a bowl of noodles for Jiang Xiu and looked at Jiang Xiu worriedly. "Are you sure you're okay?" After drinking a big bowl of noodle soup, his whole body warmed up. In addition, there was a stove, so his clothes were dried very quickly. However, his coat was a British windbreaker, which was very absorbent and would not dry in a short time. "I'm fine. Do you have more?" "There's plenty, you can eat as much as you want," the old man beside him asked. "Young man, why did you fall into the river?" If Jiang Xiu said that he drifted over from Eastern Europe or Siberia, the old man would be scared silly. "I was careless and accidentally fell into the river." The old man said, "You have to be careful. The water is not solid yet. By the way, where are you from?" The two of them chatted casually. Jiang Xiu looked at the calendar on the wall. It was already December. Including the time spent cultivating, more than a month had passed. He asked, "Uncle, has anything strange happened recently?" The old man said, "There's nothing strange. We stay in the village all day and don't know what's going on outside. At most, we just watch the news. Why don't I turn on the TV for you?" Jiang Xiu nodded. The old man's TV was okay. It was more than 20 inches, and it was in color. There were also many channels. Jiang Xiu chose an international news channel. It had been more than a month since the Battle of the Heavenly Gate, and there was no similar news. In fact, this kind of thing would never be on the news. Even the top rich people in the upper-class society did not know about it at all. It was a top secret in various countries. After watching the international news for half an hour, it could be described with 4 words: frequent natural disasters. There were many meteorites falling and earthquakes in American Barney. There were also many meteorites falling in Yunhai province in China. There were many earthquakes in western Shu. In particular, one of them said that after an earthquake in a place called Wulin in central China, the geographical area had increased by more than 10 kilometers. The relevant experts believed that this was caused by changes in the Earth's crust. "Young man, do you want to contact your family?" Jiang Xiu remembered that he couldn't stay in someone else's house. He said, "Oh, old man, do you have a phone here? Can I make a call?" The old man said, "There's one in the canteen." Jiang Xiu agreed. He could just walk away, but the other party had saved him and even ate his food. It was really inappropriate for him to just walk away like that. At the very least, he had to thank the other party properly. He went to his pocket and started to feel around. This time, it was awkward. There was not a single cent. He found a phone that was soaked in water. The old man said, "What's wrong? Are you missing something?" Jiang Xiu said, "I think I lost my wallet." The old man said, "Could it have fallen into the river?" Jiang Xiu said, "It doesn't matter. There aren't many valuable items. How about this, old man? I'll leave my phone here with you. Accompany me to make a call. The old man also saw his phone and hurriedly waved his hand. No need, no need. I'll accompany you. After drying his coat, Jiang Xiu went to the canteen with the old man. Jiang Xiu encountered a problem again. He saved all his phone numbers in his phone and didn't remember them. He only remembered the phone number of his home in Jiang City. His parents had gone to Annan and his phone number had been cancelled. He still remembered a phone number. It was Nangong Ko-er's phone number. Because he personally called her that day and received a message from this number, he remembered it. He couldn't call her. Their relationship was so complicated. If he called her, what if the other party thought too much? When he mentioned Nangong Ko-er, he remembered that warm and wild afternoon. What's wrong? The old man saw Jiang Xiu holding the phone and hesitating for a long time. The phone numbers are all in the phone. The canteen's lady boss said, "Where's the phone?" "Let me see." Jiang Xiu handed the phone over. The lady boss played with it for a while. "It's all spoiled. Take the town to repair it for 200 yuan. Who knows if the numbers inside can still be saved?" The old man was a good person. But he was a bit hesitant to accompany Jiang Xiu to town and take 200 yuan to repair Jiang Xiu's phone number. Jiang Xiu also couldn't ignore this. Jiang Xiu frowned and said, "I'll try to call her." He dialed Nangong Ko-er's number. After the phone rang 4 times, it was finally picked up. Nangong Ko-er's pleasant voice came from the other side. "Hello, who is this?" Jiang Xiu was a bit embarrassed. It's me." The other side paused for a second or two, then Nangong Ko-er said, "Who are you?" Jiang Xiu was embarrassed. His old face was a bit red. It turned out that she didn't care about him at all. He was a bit embarrassed and said, "Jiang Xiu, I have something to ask of you." "You?" Nangong Ko-er's tone was very cold. "We don't seem to know each other well." A few days after she returned home, she heard a shocking news. The old man of the Jiang family caused chaos in Jiangnan because he made a mistake. He was punished by the Dio Yutai police, and the rich and powerful family that had been rich for generations fell in one day. In order to avoid being implicated, the Nangong family quickly cut ties with the Jiang family. As for the so-called engagement between her and Jiang Xiu, the Nangong family naturally didn't recognize it anymore. The current Jiang Xiu wasn't the son of a so-called rich and powerful family, but a poor boy who didn't have a penny to his name. Of course, she didn't care who he was. Anyway, except for that one time, they almost didn't have any interactions. Jiang Xiu said, "Yes, we don't know each other well. I ran into some trouble here, and I lost all my ID and mobile phone. I only remember your number." Nangong Ko-er said, "Why do you remember my number?" Jiang Xiu thought to himself, "I don't want to. You wrote it to me in Jiang City, and then I called you. What can I do if I remember it by myself?" "How do you want me to help you?" Finally, Nangong Ko-er didn't hang up on him. Jiang Xiu said, "See how you can help me. I'm in Liaodong's River, all alone. I don't have any ID, mobile phone, or money." Nangong Ko-er said, "You came to beg me, and now you want me to think of a way?" Her tone was very harsh, and it seemed that she would hang up at any time. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.